All right, good evening, everyone. It is Tuesday, February 4th, 2020, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you were here with us in the chamber, watching on ACC TV, Charter Channel 180, YouTube, or accgov.com, you are here for the monthly voting meeting of the Athens-Clarke County Mayor and Commission. And our first order of business is to call roll. So I would ask the clerk to do that right now.
Davenport.
Here.
Parker.
Here.
Lane.
Here.
Wright.
Present.
Denson.
Here.
Naismith. Edwards.
Here.
Harrod.
Present.
Norton.
Here.
Hamby.
Here.
All right, with a quorum in place, I will ask for approval of the minutes from meetings on Tuesday, January 7th and Tuesday, January 21st.
So moved. Second.
All right, I've got a motion from Commissioner Thornton, a second from Commissioner Harrod. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, are there any written communications this evening, Madam Clerk? All right, no written communications this evening. We have one proclamation, so I'm going to come down to the mic in front of the clerk and ask Commissioner Edwards to join me as well. As I think everybody in the room, and certainly anybody who is listening right now knows, we're in a fantastic community full of giving and loving people who do fantastic things for one another and for the community at large. And so sometimes we're in a great position to be able to honor some of that work. And so via mayoral proclamation, I'd like to ask Haley Campbell to come join us up here.
Kai and Zoe.
Yeah. Ms. Campbell, thank you for coming out tonight. And so I am here with Ms. Campbell, with Commissioner Edwards, her commissioner, to present this proclamation honoring Haley Campbell Day here in Athens-Clarke County. And I'd like to describe some of the circumstances that led us here. So whereas on Memorial Day 2017, a gentleman was walking in the Glenwood neighborhood and collapsed from cardiac arrest, and Haley Campbell, being home, immediately providing CPR and reviving him before the ambulance arrived. And whereas on Sunday, January 26, 2020, Haley Campbell and her daughters, Kai and Zoe, were hiking near their home along a remote portion of the Milliconey River when she discovered a 25-foot wide sinkhole that had formed around a ruptured portion of the Milliconey main sewer trunk line. And whereas Ms. Campbell's swift outreach to neighbors and city officials prompted an emergency response that prevented what could have been the largest sewer spill in Athens history. And whereas Ms. Campbell's decisive action saved a neighbor's life and her swift response prevented an environmental disaster. And whereas Ms. Campbell's vigilance and responsiveness represent the utmost spirit of our great Athenian citizenry. Now therefore I, Kelly Gertz, Mayor of the Unified Government of Athens-Clarke County, do hereby proclaim today, February 4th, 2020, as Haley Campbell Day. And I certainly extend my deepest appreciation for them. So I'm going to go ahead and hold that.
Great. Thank you so much.
And Commissioner Edwards.
Yes.
All right, is there anyone else who wants to come up for a photo? All right, we appreciate it so much. Thank you for all your work.
Thank you so much.
Lucky to have you. All right, now is that time when I describe the standards for public input here at our voting meetings. There are going to be several opportunities for public input tonight. There will be public input opportunity on our consent agenda, public input opportunities on old and new business, individual public input opportunities on planning and zoning items, and toward the conclusion of the meeting, a public input opportunity on any item not on tonight's agenda. Norms for public input, aside from those planning and zoning items, which have some circumstances that I'll describe a little bit later, provide us the opportunity for a 3-minute opportunity for public input. You're going to see the light in front of Clerk Spratlin. It will turn green when the speaker begins. When 30 seconds is remaining, you will see the yellow light come on, And when the red light comes on, that individual opportunity is concluded. For every opportunity of public input, if you will, just please provide us with your name and the item to which you're speaking. And if you would fill out one of the public comment cards that you'll see on the podium, and you can hand those to the attorney who is right in front of the podium, and so that way we can accurately capture your name and spell it correctly. So now is that first opportunity for public input on the consent agenda, which are items number 1 through 11. Would anyone like to come to the podium to speak to one of those items this evening? Item 1 through 11. All right. Seeing none, would any commissioner like to remove a consent agenda item for discussion? All right. I'd certainly entertain a... Commissioner Davenport?
I'd just like to pull one just to make a comment.
All right. Number 1. Just for a comment, do you want to go ahead and address that now, and then we could approve the consent agenda writ large?
Yeah, I would just like to thank Mike Wharton and staff for doing their due diligence and their hard work in acquiring this valuable piece of property.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. All right, I'd entertain a motion for approval of the consent agenda tonight.
Move to approve. Second.
All right, we have a motion from Commissioner Edwards, a second from Commissioner Harrod for approval of the consent agenda. Any further discussion? All right, I think we have a couple of ordinances that the attorney is going to read before we vote.
Give me 1 second, Mr. Mayor.
Really? Executive session.
Number 1 is an ordinance attached, is item number 1 on the agenda. It's an ordinance to amend the special purpose local option sales tax 2011 budget for Athens-Clarke County so as to provide additional funding for the special purpose local option sales tax 2011 project number 28 Green Space Acquisition Program and for other purposes. Number
Is that the only ordinance on tonight's consent agenda?
the only one I see on the consent agenda. Yes, sir.
All right,
See,
with that having been read, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, we are moving forward to old and new business. So those are items number 12 through 19 on our agenda. Apologize, clerk. The motion from Commissioner Edwards, second from Commissioner Harrod. Motion from Commissioner Edwards, second from Commissioner Harrod. All right, now is that time for public input on items 12 through 19. Again, let us know the item to which you're speaking, and provide your name for us, and then you'll see the card right there on the podium for you to fill out. Come on down.
Good afternoon. My name is Paul Kramer, and I reside at 431 Greystone Terrace. And I'll be speaking tonight on item number 18, the Intergovernmental Agreement for the Classic Center. As Executive Director of the Classic Center Authority, I wanted to take the opportunity to thank the Unified Government, the Mayor and the Commission, the Manager and the Attorney for your support of the Classic Center Authority and our management of the county's facility for the past 25 years. Tonight, you have the opportunity to extend the existing lease on the land that the Convention Center and Theater and future expansion of the arena will reside on for another 50 years. We take our responsibility as caretaker of this facility very seriously, and we are indeed humbled by the opportunity to continue to do so in the future. We believe this agreement will be the first step towards realizing a promise of SPLOST 2020 and is a testament to the Commission's support of job creation, economic development, and the sustainability of small business in our community. Many facilities like ours around the country rely on general fund to support their annual operations. Through disciplined management of our facility and the supply of hotel motel tax, the Classic Center Authority has been able to keep your building in a state-of-the-art condition without coming back to the general fund. This includes taking steps to reduce our carbon footprint, as well as complete our annual capital improvements, such as new chillers, air handlers, carpeting throughout the facility, and roof repair, which we will continue both now and in the future, as well as deliver on our commitment to paying a living wage while driving nearly $80 million in economic impact back to the local community. But we can only deliver on these promises with the continuation of hotel tax coming to the authority with the receipt of private funds, which will allow us the ability to pay back the debt and keep your facility the way that we always have. With your transfer of the property and support tonight, we'll be able to start recruiting private investment to support our public-private partnership. These partnerships will allow us to create a gathering place in our community that I think all of us will be truly proud of. The arena will allow us to drive new economic impact, deliver on our promise to pay living wages in Athens, and continue to grow the culture at the heart of our region. Thank you again for all your support.
All right, thank you, Mr. Kramer. Any other input on old or new business this evening?
Hi, Carol Myers, 260 Spalding Circle. I'll work on that card. I'm also speaking in regard to the agreement as well, 18, and my words are not as finely polished as I try to get them beforehand. But I'm speaking as a member of the 100% Athens Renewable Energy Initiative in regard to the intergovernmental agreement concerning the Classic Center. I urge the Commission to include language in all the capital projects that are coming up through SPLOST, including this, to commit them to following the resolution. Thus, right now, in the lease agreement, in the improvement section, it says presently that the construction and erection of the erection and placement shall be in accordance with the Athens-Clarke County standards. I simply ask why not add and shall be built in such a way as to be in accord with the 100% clean and renewable energy resolution that states that the government will obtain 100% of its energy needs from clean and renewable energy sources produced on or for the government by 2035. I will say, as Paul Kramer just mentioned, he talked about the carbon footprint, that the Classic Center has been very amenable to working with us and having conversations, and we just today are in the midst of setting up an appointment for next week. So I appreciate that Paul Kramer and his staff to be open for that. While I'm up here, I did read the 50-page document, and so these are just nerdy questions here following up on this as well. I didn't understand what's the term senior housing development is never explained in the document, and I just need to be clarified for that, and perhaps in your comments about the project as well. I saw that the land for the arena is being added to the lease, but the land for the hotel and the senior center is being taken out. One was giving over to the Classic Center Authority, and one is to the Economic Development Authority, and maybe you all can explain in your discussions why that has to happen for the funding. I'm sure there's some legal reason for that as well. And I also noted that there was a provision in there that the Classic Center, the hotel must be able to give $633,000 to the Classic City Authority each year for the debt repayment, but there was nothing about the senior development in there, and I didn't know if that was what the reasoning was for that. So I'll just add these nerdy questions in before I sit down. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Myers.
And I'll fill out the card and get it.
All right, again, now it's time for public input on items 12 through 19, old and new business.
Hello. My name is Riley Farrell. Do I get my address too?
Gives your name and the item to which you're speaking.
Okay. Riley Farrell speaking on item 18, the Classic Center at the Intergovernmental Agreement. I'm here speaking on behalf of the Upper Oconee Watershed Network, and really we're just a little bit concerned about kind of, I guess, the vagueness of the Intergovernmental Agreement as it's laid out. We sort of just want to make sure that proper considerations are given to a variety of other stakeholders outside of what are specifically, or who are specifically part of the committees that are designed to pick out the contractors for each of the phases of the project. As it stands, there are only members of the Unified Government and the Classic Center Authority on those committees, but we think it would be valuable to have members with expertise on a variety of topics, including clean water, green energy, other considerations that may be of interest to other members of the county outside of just the Athens-Clarke County Unified Government and outside of the Classic Center Authority. Yeah, we understand the project has the potential to bring awesome development to the county as a whole, but we just want to make sure proper consideration is given before actually instituting this agreement and allowing for whatever sort of like free reign that the agreement would give those committees to select the contractors that they would for the projects that compose the Classic Center and its new arena redevelopment. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farrell. Any other input on old or new business tonight?
Hi, my name is Michael Smith, 147 Bryan Street. I think I'm speaking about number 17 and number 18. Number 17 been a bond issued for SPLOST, I think, and for $26 million. Don't know how long the document's been available. I just saw it, and then and on number 18 on the Classic Center agreement, I think it was referred to as number 19, but I think it's 18. On the municipal bond, I think that the commission, it'd be in the commission's best interest to hold on passing that tonight, especially if they haven't had a chance to understand it. Municipal bond markets in the United States are changing. And for instance, I think in Oakland, in the city of Oakland, they're putting forth a program they believe are going to get passed that issues micro bonds to people in the community as part of their larger bond package. But my primary thing is if the public hasn't had the ability to review this bond for at least 30 days, that we may be overpaying for the bond. And an example is that a group of citizens challenged the percentage we were paying in SPLOST for the engineering contract, and the commission looked into it, and the very first concession the engineering group gave was for $850,000. And so now that's going to a proposal. So being a little more diligent on municipal bonds is a good idea. On number 18, it's a 58-page agreement, and I'm not certain, but it probably leads to conversations like someone giving $1 million and putting their name on the Classic City Arena, and also probably gives luxury student home developers an opportunity to do their thing on the property and it not been vetted enough, each key component of it. So I would just delay both for 30 days, get everybody the opportunity to be more informed on the subject before y'all take a vote. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Other input on old and new business tonight? All right. All right, we're going to move forward to item number 12 first. This is our school resource officer agreement for the 2020-2021 academic year. Yes, Attorney Drake.
Mr. Mayor, my apologies, but in looking back, I noticed that for item number 1 on the budget, consent agenda budget, there are actually 2 ordinances. I read the first one. I'd like the opportunity to read the second, which is on page 6 of the agenda.
Thank you. I appreciate it if you do that now.
An ordinance to amend the special purpose local option sales tax 2011 budget for Athens-Clarke County so as to provide grant and loan funding through the Georgia Department of Natural Resources Land Conservation Program for acquisition of property for the Green Space Program and for other purposes.
All right, so just for confirmation, we're going to reconfirm the consent agenda.
Move to approve.
Second.
All right, we've got a motion from Commissioner Edwards, second from Commissioner Harrod. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Good times. All right, moving on now to old business, item number 12, School Resource Officer Agreement for 2020-2021. Commissioner Denson.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I just want to thank the manager's office and the police department for getting some of the data that I requested last time out to us, and it's very thorough and good. I do have a concern after I went through this, that a few of the school resource officers that we have currently in service, including the one that has the most incidents and the most arrests, has not actually completed the school resource officer training or attended it. And it looks like we have a handful of officers that fit, at least two that I can see, that have not actually received the school resource officer training. And I find that just honestly a little bit concerning. And I think that if we're going to be giving money into this program, that we should, I think that's a requirement we should have in place, that before a school resource officer is in place as a school resource officer, they have received the adequate training to do so. Because then you look back at some of the other officers who have more experience, who have this training, who have other trainings, the ratio of incidents they deal with to arrests is much, much lower.
So, Commissioner, do you want to offer an amended motion?
I guess I would like, if this is something that we can add into this, that we require all school resource officers to complete school resource officer training before being placed in the field in one of the schools. Yes.
Commissioner Wright?
Yeah, I'm curious about the feasibility of that, in that due to the shortage that we have with staffing in the police department, and I'm wondering if we had some information on how long it takes to get that training, to make sure. I would hate for us to have a gap in the resources at the schools pending. I understand the pending the training. I just wonder, with the turnover that we've had in the last couple of years, that we might be building back up and making sure the training's happening.
Manager Williams, do you or anyone in the police department have kind of notion of what the viability is of ensuring training by the start of the 2020-21 academic year?
Well, it's a 40-hour course, as y'all know, and if it happens in the summer of this year, then they should be fine for the beginning of the new academic year. I think we had a couple of vacancies. We're bringing in new officers as well, so that should be an issue.
And don't we get reimbursed? I mean, this money goes out, but we get reimbursed from the school district for this.
Manager Williams?
It's not.
We do. It's a shared cost. For 176 school days a year, the officers are paid by the school district plus 20% of their supervisor's salary. And then when school's not in session, they do community outreach during the summer, help with summer camps, things of that nature. It's been a good relationship, for both. And to that point, and y'all have made some repeated statements about the need for additional training for these officers, because it's a different environment with the kids, and they get to know the kids too. And I think that's been helpful, I think, for both sides and the schools.
All right, so we have a motion and a second on the floor. Any further discussion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Commissioner Neesmith.
I share Tim's concern. However, we can't conclude that because this SRO didn't get the training, he has a higher arrest record, that there's a cause and effect there. But never mind that, the fact that they're not trained is not acceptable.
Commissioner Harrod.
So which version are we voting on?
I believe the motion was to approve the contract with the provision that any officers beginning the 2020 year would receive the training.
Would have received the training.
Is that accurately reflected?
Yeah, that's fine.
Would have received the training.
Would have received the training, yes. All right, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Moving on to item number 13, Dudley Park Improvements, Subproject 1, Schematic Design. I know that been some conversation between Commissioner Parker and staff members about what some of the prospects could have been for basketball. So Commissioner Parker, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I hope everyone got the amended version of this agenda item at your desk. It stems from some options that were presented to us by the manager's office in conjunction with Keith Sanders and Kent Kilpatrick, who I want to thank for their hard work on working through some of the possibilities for bringing some active recreation to this area. So we had talked about two different options, the first being a portable basketball hoop that could be co-located with the amphitheater area so that when there aren't shows going on, people can play pickup games and the like. The second option was to put about $100,000 into building some courts over at a piece of property adjacent to Dudley Park and the Firefly Trail. I decided to support the first option because I think that $100,000 is kind of steep for a new set of courts when we have courts that are currently existing at places like Lake Park, at the East Athens Community Center, that could greatly benefit from that funding. And so to go with the cheaper option that still opens up the availability of some basketball at Dudley Park without jeopardizing the grants that we have available to us, while looking in the near future for how we can get some of that funding allocated for renovations for places like Lake Park and East Athens Community Center, sounded like the best idea to me. So with that being said, I would like to first ask if there is a renovation schedule that is currently published or in the works for places like Lake Park or East Athens Community Center to see some upgrades on their basketball facilities.
I believe East Athens is about 2 or 3 years away, although I spoke with Kent Kilpatrick while we were talking about the alternatives, and he said he had made an application for CDBG funds for that. I'm not sure that was recommended for funding, but that'll be coming to the February work session. But in all, we're talking about, I think, roughly $60,000 to resurface those. If I'm correct, I'll check on that.
Okay.
And we can talk about different funding sources if CDBG is not ultimately approved for that.
Okay, if we're going to make the case that we have a proliferation of sites for basketball in this area, we should make sure we're putting our money where our mouth is regarding making sure they're up to a standard where people want to go use them. But for the meantime, I am content with approving options 1A, B, and C, as well as D, for the Dudley Park improvements.
I'll second.
CDO.
The
Your commission-defined option.
So it's included in the agenda,
Oh, okay.
the new agenda item?
Okay.
Yeah, so I don't think I need to make a CDO
Right.
capturing
Okay,
the,
good.
yeah.
All right, so I've got a motion from Commissioner Parker, a second from Commissioner Wright. Further discussion? Commissioner Herrick?
Thank you. I just have one very quick question. So on facts and issues number 5, this is for the manager. It says that we're applying for a grant, and I'm assuming that this is not going to affect that in any way.
That's right. That was really the pavilion and the restrooms.
Okay.
But having the activity on the amphitheater stage is not going to conflict with that.
Yes, Attorney Drake.
There is an ordinance associated with this agenda item as attachment number 2. It's an ordinance to amend the special purpose local option sales tax 2011 budget for Athens-Clarke County so as to provide additional funding for the special purpose local option sales tax 2011 project number 17 Dudley Park improvements and for other purposes.
All right, having heard the ordinance, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, speaking of budget ordinances, moving on to item number 14. This is a budget ordinance to request funding to purchase necessary equipment for implementation of a new voting system. And as you can see in the agenda item, there's been some additional contingency funding that's been built in since our last conversation. So be interested in any commissioner input. Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to staff for finding a little extra money to put towards this. This is a humongous election year. We have new voting equipment. We've had lots of people purged from the rolls. And it's extra important that we get the word out to folks so when they can register, how they can register, when the primaries are, when the local elections are, when the November presidential election is. And I believe that, it would necessitate some outside professional assistance in marketing and communications. And I look forward to seeing what the Board of Elections comes up with on how to get these words out. And we have brand-new machines, and we know what went down in Iowa last night when you're dealing with new technology. So we want to make sure that we are tip-top and completely trained and informed and ready to go for all these elections and to make sure that democracy works in Athens, Georgia.
Commissioner Neesmith?
Yeah, I don't want to get too wrapped around the axle about what happened in Iowa last night. That was not a new machine. That was untested software, which, by the way, one should never, ever do. Ever. So, yeah, I'm in favor of this, but thank you, Melissa.
I move that we accept it.
Second.
All right, so I've got a motion from Commissioner Link, second from Commissioner Neesmith. I'm going to have Attorney Drake read the ordinance and then move on to continued input.
Attached number 1 to this agenda item, an ordinance to amend the FY 2020 annual operating and capital budget for Athens-Clarke County, Georgia, so as to provide funding for expenses related to the implementation of new voting system and equipment in the Board of Elections Department and for other purposes.
Thank you, Attorney Drake. Commissioner Herrick.
Thank you. I just have a question. So I'm looking at the history, and it says, during the 2018 General Assembly, the state's budget included $1,039,887.43 funding for implementation of the new voting system for ACC Gov. However, that funding was not sufficient to cover the costs of all necessary equipment and/or consumables for our local election office. So that shortfall, so the state is telling us that we have to do this, but is not giving us the money to do it in the way in which it needs to be done. And so that shortfall is this $136,898, is that correct?
Well, we do need additional funds. There's some ancillary equipment that we need, carts. We need to pay, some of this funds are to help pay some extra staff or people to be there because, and I want to say this so folks understand, the ballot marking device will apparently spit out a piece of paper that shows you the vote, but that is not a receipt. You need to turn that in, and so there need to be people there to tell people. It has to be scanned. That's right. And so, and this is something all counties in Georgia are having to deal with. In fact, I appreciate y'all considering some extra contingency, given that the election's so close. We did, we came up with what we think we needed, but there could be something else, and we didn't want to come to you in a rush. They did buy the ballot marking devices and the associated printers. Left our own devices, we would have spent more money to buy those, I think. So we did take advantage of a group purchase, if you will.
And do you know, is there any indication that there will be any additional funds coming from the state to cover these costs, or is that it?
There is a matching grant for certain things such as ADA accessibility and security purchases, I think up to $15,000. So there's a small grant that could come back, but that's the extent that I'm aware of.
Okay, so an unfunded mandate. Okay.
Partially funded mandate.
Commissioner Denson.
Just wanted to take a quick second. Anybody who's here or watching that they have a test machine right now at the Board of Elections office. They're also having machines go around other places in the county. I wouldn't do it. I'd highly encourage everybody to go do this thing. If you're familiar with it, it makes it a lot easier. It makes a lot more sense in your head. It also makes a lot more sense of why it's definitely an unfunded mandate, because as far as I understand, they did give us the printers, but they did not give us the special paper that you have to use to print. So that means every county has to buy that. Plus the printer cartridges for the special printers. I mean, the counties all have to pay for this kind of stuff. So it definitely, I see this as an unfunded mandate.
All right, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Moving on to item number 15, Biosolids handling and our disposal contract amendment. Commissioner Link.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. I understand we'll be reducing the amount of biosolids going into our landfill, and this contract is to pay a hauler to haul it off. I'm just curious as to where is it hauled to and what is it? I know there are industrial, commercial uses for these things. I'm just curious if we have any idea what the end place for this stuff is going to be.
Well, let me just say, in its current form, the Denali goes and negotiates its best price it can. I need to find out where that is exactly. I think it's in the Winder landfill that Republic runs. I will say, though, that coming to you in the near future are some allocation of funds to proceed with the thermal dryers, which will reduce the moisture content and therefore, and that's really what makes them difficult to handle. Also, I will say that we had the Public Utilities Budget meeting this week as we're working on the budget, and they're proposing a partnership with solid waste where we can actually increase our composting capacity, and that they would actually help to do that. They recognize what a burden this is. And as you know, and it says in the agenda item, when all the plants were rebuilt, it was envisioned that one day we would start to deal with this, and then we are today.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll make a motion that we adopt this.
Second.
Have a motion from Commissioner Link, second from Commissioner Edwards. Any other input on this item? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Moving on to item number 16, acquisition of computer software for the Finance and Human Resources Departments. Looking to my left because I'm anticipating that Commissioner Neesmith would be interested in weighing in on this item.
Well, as y'all know, I reviewed the contract and the terms and so forth and asked some questions and requested some changes. And staff and the vendor addressed every concern that I had. I was very, very pleased with the contract that resulted, so thank you. So I'll move to adopt.
Second.
All right, we have an ordinance. Attorney Drake.
Attachment number 1 to this item, an ordinance to amend the FY 2020 annual operating capital budget for Athens-Clarke County, Georgia, so as to provide funding for the purchase and installation of enterprise resource planning software and for other purposes.
We had a motion from Commissioner Neesmith, who provided the second.
Second.
A second from Commissioner Edwards. Any other input on this item? We are fortunate to have a wide range of expertise behind the rail, friends. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, moving forward to item number 17. This is authorization for issuance of general obligation bonds associated with SPLOST 2020. I think everybody should have a bond resolution in front of them. For those for whom this is their first time at this rodeo, it's not uncommon for there to be negotiation leading up to the days of a vote. And so you have cost of insurance, the underwriter's discount, and additional proceeds that are in front of you to produce the total that will be drawn from the SPLOST 2020 allocation. Commissioner Wright?
And since we did just get the numbers today, 1.048%.
Wow.
Just, that's the true interest cost. So we've got new money numbers to, anyway, this is outstanding.
You're saying that to somebody who remembers the 17% interest that his parents were paying on a home in the 80s. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So this is really good. There is no room to delay. We want to make sure we snag this opportunity and the money that it provides flexibility with the math we've been doing since all last year with what this would look like.
That's right. Commissioner Link?
Somebody who's better at math than me, can you tell me what 1.048% comes out to over the life of this bond? Like how much is actually going to Morgan Stanley in percentage rates? Is that it right there?
I think so.
Is it? Does anybody, I mean, we've got the cost of insurance and the underwriter's discount, which come to about $167,000. But I'm curious to know, like, what additional portion of this chunk of SPLOST money is going to something other than the actual construction of the projects?
Manager Williams, would it be fair to say it would be
ballpark.
determined by when the bonds are retired?
Yes.
I'm
yes.
just saying ballpark. I'm just gonna,
Well,
You have to have an amortization table for that one.
we've got, there's also a premium involved as well, which is, complicates it a little bit. Let me, if you'd like, I can ask our finance director to come speak to that.
yeah, I mean, I want the public to realize what we're getting into when we talk about these SPLOST projects and bond funding for them, that, you know, these high-dollar projects are not all construction projects. A lot of this money is going to banks and insurance agents, and
Well,
there's a lot of additional cost.
Well, and for the public's benefit, one of the reasons why why you might want to borrow on some of the larger projects is that, you know, if you had to wait for enough to come in, it really pushes a lot of other projects as well. That's one thing. Secondly, the interest environment is favorable. But I also want to commend the mayor and commission and this government as well. We had 19 bids on this, which is higher than normal. And the low interest rate is a direct reflection of the risk that is anticipated by the underwriter, which means we're not seen as a high risk because of the way that finances are managed and the way that this government's conducted. So I want to tell you that there's a benefit to those higher credit ratings from being financially managed well and in the form of lower interest rates.
And I know just before Director Boyd speaks,
Yeah,
I
let me
had
point
a
out,
question from Commissioner
the
Neesmith.
huge benefit is that we're able to start these projects at the then current construction prices, which are going up quite certain at a much higher rate than 1%. So we are actually saving money by being able to borrow this money and start the projects and finish the projects at the front end of the SPLOST cycle.
Yes, Director
Yeah,
Boyd.
basically the way this worked is, we just went out for competitive bid. It's all electronic. So we got 19 bids. So the lowest was Morgan Stanley. The only thing we're paying to Morgan Stanley, because Morgan Stanley has already sold these bonds, I've got to tell them after this meeting if y'all approved it. But they've already sold these bonds, basically, got commitments for them. So the only charge we're paying to Morgan Stanley for this $32 million is $17,573, which is the underwriting fee. The interest cost over 11 years for $32 million is about $1.9 million. Now, we originally, 2 or 3 months ago, the financial advisor was estimating that we would pay 1.8% true interest cost. So we're getting it about 80 basis points cheaper than what we originally estimated, which I think we estimated about $3.2 million in interest just even a couple of months ago. That's now fallen to $1.9 million.
Okay,
So-
thank you, I appreciate that. Yeah, so we're getting this fabulous interest rate because this project is seen as basically a gold mine for whoever
No.
ends up investing in it. It's foreseen as being a successful project.
No, it's the stability of the government is what,
Okay.
we're a low risk to purchase bonds from. The bond, the entities that purchase the bonds feel very good that they're going to get their money back.
Okay, so they're not looking at the project itself, they're looking at us as a government.
That we would,
Backing
we stand
project.
behind it.
Okay.
And I would say, just while we're talking about it, when you go through a bond sale, you know, Moody's, other rating agencies rate us, and we were rated again a AA1, which is just one step below a AAA, and there's reasons why that is. But again, I think it says a lot about the way, you know, the elected officials and our financial staff have managed our finances.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Commissioner
I
Neesmith.
think it says a lot about our management and our management capabilities, so thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Director Boyd, as long as he's up here? All right, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved. Second.
All right, I've got a motion from Commissioner Neesmith, second from Commissioner Davenport. Attorney Drake, do you need to read an ordinance on this, or given that's a resolution, there's,
There's not an ordinance on this.
Okay.
item, resolution.
all right. All right, any other input? All right, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right. Item number 18, somewhat related, the intergovernmental agreement with the Classic Center Authority. Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I had lots and lots of questions and concerns about this agreement, and I got a copy that I marked up. It kind of looks like I opened up a vein over it. And I sent these questions to the attorney early in the week, and I got a response late Friday. I haven't had a chance to really process them till yesterday. And some of there's been a lot of back and forth in this body all week about this agreement and tweaks made to it. And I just like to, the public has not been involved in this discussion at all and had an opportunity to hear some of our concerns and had them explained out loud. So first, I just want to go through some of these concerns and hear what staff and the attorney have to say. And I want to make it clear that, on the agenda, this was just listed as the Classic Center agreement. I don't think much of the public realize that this goes way beyond just the Classic Center intergovernmental agreement and their lease agreement. This is the agreement laying the groundwork for a massive, massive redevelopment of eastern downtown. It includes not just an arena, but a parking deck, and a high-rise hotel and a high-rise condo building, a senior housing condo. So I think the public needs to be aware of that. This isn't just the arena on that SPLOST list. The parking deck and the senior condo and the hotel are going to help pay for that arena by leasing the land, the publicly owned land underneath it. They're going to be developing their property on our land and paying rent, basically, on this public land that will go into paying for the additional $30–40 million outside of SPLOST funds that will be needed to pay for the arena. So I think the public needs to make sure that they're aware of this. I have a question right away about the urgency of this. It's a 58-page agreement, highly complex language. I feel like the public certainly hasn't had time to vet this. They haven't been part of this conversation. Is there any urgency to this? Could we not delay it a couple of weeks and allow for a little more time to tweak the language and address some of the concerns? Maybe the attorney could answer my question. Is there any legal ramification to that?
I'm not very aware of any legal ramifications that require. I know that there's an urgency to. The Classic Center certainly would like to move forward and be able to start preparing to issue the RFP on the senior housing project and the hotel project to begin securing the additional financing necessary to build the Classic Center arena.
Can anyone else give me any reason why there's a real urgency? What would a week or two's delay?
Well, I would just echo what the attorney said in that, for the Classic Center, they're interested in putting an RFP out for these various developments, and they can't proceed with any of that. And I'm just saying this for the benefit of everybody. The RFP, the entities that end up winning the RFP to build these facilities and leasing these spaces will provide revenue that will then help the Classic Center finalize its financing for the rest of the bonds required beyond SPLOST to actually build the arena. So there's just a number of dominoes that have to fall that the Classic Center Authority wanted to move forward on.
So in the RFP process, I know Commissioner Hamby and I have been appointed to the committee that will be vetting those RFPs. Will this committee have anything to do with the actual RFP itself, what the RFP is requesting of the potential contractors?
I don't know that. A lot of times when you do pull a group together, you do go over the scope and you talk about evaluation criteria, but I have not asked that question of the Classic Center Authority.
So and that's something that I feel isn't addressed in the agreement, the specifics of that committee's duties and whether or not that RFP is going to be, the proposals that come in are just going to be given to that committee, or if that committee itself is going to have some say on what they're asking for in these proposals.
Commissioner, I think there are at least some financial givens in that the commission and voter approved project language, anticipated funding streams, as you've noted. And so those funding streams would have to be realized in order to get this ship off the ground. So certainly that would be a component. I don't know if Executive Director Kramer has any other input on what the construction of that RFP language would look like.
Well, some of the conversation this week had to do with living wage provisions. And the Classic Center itself is committed to a living wage, but there are quite a few contractors that they work with. And of course, these private entities will be developing hotels and senior housing on this property. And it's unclear whether or not they'd be beholden to the living wage. Ms. Myers came up and talked about renewable energy. We as a local government have committed to 100% renewable energy. These are, structures that are going to be built on public property, yet there's no mention of that commitment to renewable energy in this agreement. I have concerns about water quality. This is right on the river. There's a massive stormwater conveyance, and the property that's being built on currently serves to filter stormwater. So we're going to be covering that up. And the senior housing, it is very vague. Is there going to be any provision for even moderate income senior housing, or is this going to be purely luxury senior housing? Is there any analysis of what the actual senior housing needs are in our community?
Commissioner, before I move on to some other commissioners, I could at least provide a little bit of context for the public and broadly for the room. This is, of course, one of many whistle stops for this. Later ones, as you've noted, include that group RFP response around just those two footprints. But what this intergovernmental agreement and lease agreement anticipates is that the design and all of those physical components of the arena and associated development will return to the mayor and commission, and we haven't even begun to talk about what the structured parking between Willow and Hickory Streets could look like yet. That would be subject to a separate agreement. As a preview of a later portion of the evening, we'll be assigning to one of the standing committees our review of minority contracting and procurement. And there is, of course, an element in this MOU that has to do with the Classic Center abiding by those fair wage requirements of the unified government broadly. So I do need to move on to some other input, given your time has expired. Commissioner Denson.
Thank you, Mayor Gertz. And on that part, so yeah, I know that Commissioner Wright has CDO that she has put forward that speaks to the living wage provision, and saying that it would be applicable to employees of the landlord and employees of the tenants. Basically, any kind of ordinance, resolution, or policy adopted by the Mayor Commission of the Unified Government when it comes to living wages. My concern is that currently we don't have a living wage ordinance or resolution directing that. And really for me to feel comfortable supporting this, and I know I've heard from a number of my fellow commissioners, that I would just want to make sure that we actually spoke here tonight saying that we're going to move forward and actually addressing this and putting forth an ordinance or a resolution. And one that I think that we should be able to, my suggestion would be like, within 3 years, we have $15 an hour, for county employees, but for all others, including the Classic Center, everybody under this agreement here. But I would just like to make sure that we are actually taking that step, because sometimes, as I've noticed, we have a lot going on, and sometimes we want to do something, but then it kind of falls off the table and we forget about it. So I want to make sure that we could actually, I would request that you assign this also to committee so that we can actually have that ordinance or resolution in place. And then the one other thing I had, and I guess this would be asking, first and foremost, Commissioner Wright, I did like what Ms. Myers brought up in the 100% Athens folks brought together. And knowing that we're trying to get to 100% renewable energy for county usage, these buildings, this arena is going to be probably, it's going to use up a lot of energy. And I think it is definitely a great opportunity for us to make sure that we're actually doing what we've stated we want to do in our 100% renewable energy resolution. And so I wonder if Commissioner Wright would be amenable to adding the language of on her resolution to the part that is 5.1 improvements, saying that it shall be built in such a way as to be in accordance with the 100% clean and renewable energy resolution passed by UGACC.
My time? Thanks for introducing the commission-defined option that I added in. I did want to get some history to the process. As typical, our agenda-setting meeting is when we talk about these subjects, and many of us had different things that we wanted clarified about what happens with some of the lease funding as well as the hotel motel after the initial debt that the Classic Center undertakes for the arena, which is totally different from the SPLOST money that is our obligation to this project. And so that was captured, started off being a commission-defined option with Commissioner Denson and Commissioner Link, and we worked with Judd, and he got it into the proper terminology. We launched that out so everybody could start looking at it, and I really appreciate Mayor Gertz picking it up and working with it as well, and working with the numbers, which I think is the main thing that got adjusted. As most people who have followed me during budget, every year I try to find a more diverse usage of our hotel motel. And locking in a commitment to the Classic Center for the hotel motel at the current rate that we give it, to me, is providing the most diverse I've seen of a package. The economic development, the jobs, having this, when we get it defined, what the fair wage or living wage is for the unified government, that it would also be for the tenant. We're doing that. Their commitment to doing that is, our commitment is to helping them financially do that. So I just wanted to explain that part. That said, I have not studied, I was busy doing that part, and have not studied the energy part, so I'm not sure financially how that works, because the numbers are what got me to where I am today for the commission-defined option to go with what the mayor has put in the packet. And I don't know what the numbers by adding that in there is going to do to it.
Certainly on the energy component, I'd note again that the design, exterior and interior, will return to us. I think as a body, we've said broadly, we're looking at the public spaces that we manage, as being within the contours that Commissioner Denson defined. We certainly have another bite at the physical nature of the apple here.
Is it more, I guess what I'm getting at, is it more appropriate for us to be addressing that specific detail at the next at the checkpoints that are specifically about that?
Whether it's appropriate or not, I think you could make that own determination, but we definitely can address that question at that point when we're talking conceptually. Yeah. So as a lot of folks know, we move through generally a two-phase process in terms of the physical outline of a project. There's a conceptual framework, and then there are detailed engineering plans. And so as we move into conceptual framework, I think that would absolutely be a time when we could say, conceptually, this is going to have to work in accord with our standing resolution around clean energy.
So I think I would like to, just for the for the transparency, and as much as we've been working on since the agenda-setting meeting, that had not been brought up, and these other topics had been addressed and brought up at previous things. I think I want to stick with what had been previously discussed, and then use the opportunities as our next checkpoints to make sure that we're addressing the energy.
But before responding to Commissioner Denson, I want to make sure you didn't have any other elements you wanted to discuss, Commissioner Denson.
I guess the only other part is that just to have clarification on that, because my understanding was while the concepts and design of the arena will come before this body, the concept and design of the hotel and the senior center, are those going to come before this body?
Those are going to come before that RFP response committee.
And so that's why we're not going to have another checkpoint. This body is not going to have another checkpoint
for those two
buildings then. And so that's why I think it'd be important to have that language included in this agreement, because we're not going to have that checkpoint for those two buildings.
So just as a point of order, Mr. Mayor, is the terminology he quoted to capture for the energy need to be vetted through the attorney as far as adding it at this point?
Attorney Drake, if you could just weigh in on the sort of pertinence of the of prospectively including the language as already adopted by this body regarding unified government facilities, assisting us in moving toward completely clean and renewable sources.
I agree with the mayors and Commissioner Denson are both right. I think it'd be appropriate to check that on the next, for the Class Center Arena project. But Commissioner Denson's right. Currently, that matter hasn't been addressed. It's not addressed in this agreement, nor has it been discussed with the Classic Center Authority. So my concern would be, ultimately the Classic Center Authority has to vote to approve this agreement. It's not it's not a unilateral agreement. And so whether or not it affects the financial viability of the project to generate the income necessary to be able to fund the Classic Center may be a discussion, that needs to be had. I don't know. I can't answer that question. Certainly, this body could vote and add it that night, but I can't sit here and guarantee that the Classic Center Authority is going to say we're going to approve it, because it may not work for them.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Commissioner Neesmith.
I think this is such an important issue because we have made this commitment, and it obviously does need some discussion with the Classic Center, perhaps some more among ourselves and with the public. I'd like to move that we table this matter.
I'll second.
I put it, under improvements.
Got a motion and a second. Commissioner Harrod.
Thank you. I had a question for the attorney. So the stuff in the CDO about the living wage, and I certainly am very supportive of initiatives to bring about living wages. I've spent a lot of my time looking at these and working on these kinds of issues, but I have a question. So there is a state prohibition on local governments requiring living wages. How might that because we're talking here about requiring tenants to pay a living wage. How does that run into the state prohibition on local governments requiring living wages? Which I wish there were not a prohibition, but there is.
The language that is set forth in here is the language that's already in the authorities legislation. It doesn't speak to tenants. So this is taken directly from the enabling legislation of the Classic Center Authority and just copied in here. They've already agreed in their enabling legislation to follow anything that we do for our employees. This only applies to our employees.
Well, this says tenants. The tenant agrees that any ordinance, resolution, and/or policy.
The Classic Center Authority.
That's what's meant by
Is the
tenant.
tenant, yes, sir.
So if a coffee shop comes in.
That's not, the tenant being referred to here is the Classic Center
Okay,
Authority.
all right.
The Classic Center Authority is our tenant on
Okay.
this property.
Is the Classic Center Authority then able to turn around and tell the coffee shop person that they
I don't
must
think
pay a
they
living
could.
wage?
No, this only applies to their employees.
Okay. I just want everybody to be clear about that.
Yep.
Commissioner Thornton.
I think that I'm going to agree with Jerry, but I just want to make sure. So I think Ms. Myers did bring up a point that nobody else thought about. So are you saying that, or is somebody saying that if we don't change or add the language, because we all have agreed that we want to go in the direction of renewable energy. So if we don't take this opportunity tonight to interject it, we're going to pass that opportunity?
No, I'm saying exactly the opposite. I'm saying we've got at least two other opportunities to address that question.
But somebody else looked like they said something different.
So generally speaking, kind of after an agreement like this, on a SPLOST project, we would move into conceptual framework. And so that begins to contemplate, all right, what's the footprint of the building? In general terms, what are the connections to existing spaces? Kind of what are the programming demands upon the space? And so the clean energy component could be embedded there. And then as we move into engineering, exactly where the stairwell is, exactly where the windows are, where the solar panels are on the roof, then we've got that next opportunity as well. So we've got at least two opportunities. So.
But not on the land lease.
That would be an additional opportunity, but we have two more opportunities.
We were just told we don't get that opportunity. on the leased properties.
With respect to the senior housing project and the hotel, that's going to be going to the review committee. They'll have that opportunity, but the way the agreement's currently written, those two projects would not come back to the commission.
Manager Williams.
If that's something that the review committee wanted to do, that could be incorporated into the RFP process for the folks to come bid on those projects.
It's not, this body has no say.
But it would not, yes, no, I'm just saying ways to do what you would like to accomplish.
Well, another, oh, I'm sorry.
I've got a couple folks. Commissioner Parker?
So, I've seen on numerous occasions with this body that we talk about opportunities coming up down the road for us to make decisions of grave impact. And the can gets kicked down the road, and the next thing you know, it's getting built, and we don't get the language that we want to see on an agenda item. And so I would like to see us tackle this on the front end, just to make sure we all get what we want before moving ahead. So I plan on supporting Commissioner Neesmith's motion to table this.
Table.
Give the opportunity, sorry, really quick, give the opportunity for the Classic Center to look at the way that 100% clean and renewable energy would affect their numbers, as well as giving us the chance to see that, see what we can do around living wage, see what we can do around a minority and small business contracting with regards to developments, et cetera. It works out well for everybody if we do it this way.
Commissioner Hamby?
I was just saying, maybe another way is to also have in this agreement that the senior housing and hotel come back to the mayor and commission along with the arena. I mean, that way everything has 2 checkpoints from this body.
Call the
But that's, well, I think we're still discussing it, but.
We can discuss it after we table it.
Yeah.
Commissioner Wright?
The rate on the bonds is just is another consideration, and I guess if because I was stalling on the renewable energy part, if we add that in tonight, can we move forward?
I think that's a question for the commission.
I think the problem there is we have to get the Classic Center board to approve this change. So I think we need to take the time to work with them to see that whatever changes we are proposing is agreeable to them and understood by them, and you know, they have time to think about them too.
Well, I would like to make a substitute motion that we add in the, Commissioner Denson, would you like to bring that in? To add this into the motion that go with the commission-defined option, to go with the agenda item, intergovernmental agreement, and the lease that's in the packet. And by us moving it forward, it does go to the Classic Center. If we approve that, it goes to the Classic Center to look at what has changed since this came to us at the agenda setting.
Just as a clarification of process, it would be an amended motion rather than a substitute motion, since you made the original motion.
So I would like to amend the motion to include Commissioner Denton.
On 5.1, to have it state the construction, erection, and placement of any improvement shall be in accordance with the Athens-Clarke County standards, and shall be built in such a way as to be in accordance with the 100% clean and renewable energy resolution that states that UGA, Unified Government of Athens-Clarke County, will obtain 100% of its energy needs from clean renewable energy sources produced on or off Unified Government properties by 2035.
All right, so that's an amended initial motion. There was a substitute motion from Commissioner Neesmith. Commissioner Neesmith, do you want to retain your substitute?
Well, let me just say something. I think this gives the Classic Center perhaps a good and reasonable out, and that is the buildings could be built such that solar energy or some renewable energy form could be retrofit into them by 2035. Be careful if that's what you want. I don't think it's unreasonable, but they can build it so that solar can be added, that all the infrastructure is there to support solar. But if they can't afford to put those structures in now, they could do it before 2035. That would be in compliance with our commitment.
Yes, that is basically just so that it falls in line with our own resolution, which does say just by 2035. If for some bizarre reason it was found that it was more cost effective to build it this way and then change it, which I don't think that would be true, because then you wouldn't actually realize the energy benefits and discounts.
But we're doing, that's one of our standards too, is that we're building buildings so they can be, so solar can be added to them at the least expensive way in the future. I was wondering, and I think that's fine. I would substitute, I would kill my substitute motion. But I'm wondering, are we missing any other issues here? We've got the living wage issue, which I think the attorney has said we can't do by state law.
It would only, the living wage issue is addressed in here, would only apply to the employees of the Classic Center.
Right, I understand. So we can't impose that upon the people who lease our land.
Well, I suppose I'd have to research that.
Well, if that's the case, then I think we need to table it. So
I think ultimately, I'd have to research that.
So I'll stick with my table motion.
Commissioner Harris?
I have a question. I don't know whether this is for the manager or the attorney or for whoever. And I just asked this because I don't actually know what the answer to the question is. If we were to approve this as is tonight, we can lock in the interest rate. Can we then come back in a month and change some of the language? So in other words, we can get the interest rate that we have in front of us now and then maybe slightly amend the language a month from now?
Well, if I understand, this is really separate from the bond issuance.
Okay.
So the interest rate is there, and once you've approved that, then that sale will go through. Any delays that you encounter, the funds will be there. So it won't affect the interest rate going forward. It just, it pushes the project a little further out in the future for when you actually start drawing down or using the bond funds. Am I answering your question?
Yeah, I think that was one of the things, we've got a great interest rate in front of us, so I wouldn't want to do anything that affects that, but it sounds like that's not what would happen anyway.
Right. The intergovernmental contract for the master planning land transfer is, whatever you do with that does not affect the bond issuance.
Would it affect the amount of the bonds that might need to be raised?
Well, so that's a very good question. And I think, the Classic Center, if you go back in history, made an ask for a certain amount of money. They were only given so much. They're going to raise the balance of it. And I think that to make the facility 100% renewable is going to cost some additional funds over the next, decade and a half. And so I think if you were to ask them, they'd say, sure, we would take more money to help make that happen. But that's not part of what the agreement is at this point. I'm answering your question.
Commissioner Thornton?
I am totally confused now, so I'll pass.
Commissioner Denson and then Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. And I speak in support of Commissioner Neesmith's motion because I think that this is just showing there's a lot of elements that I think need to be ironed out and need to be. This is a big project. This is huge. This is the future of our downtown in many ways. So I think it is definitely worth a week or two for us just to make sure that we get this right. But with that being said, because I do like the way the living wage language that Commissioner Wright and Mayor Gertz came up with. I like the way it's structured, but again, it hinges all on us actually having a living wage ordinance or resolution. So I still just want to request that that the mayor assign a living wage ordinance to committee so that that is happening. We're not wasting any time while that's happening. They just happen anyways. And then maybe we even have that in place or close to in place whenever we go to vote on this agreement again.
Just in terms of timing, Commissioner Denson, I'm happy to to send that question to committee. I want to make sure that the question is broad enough so that it encompasses some of the other boards, authorities, or governmental entities with which we interact, so that if we're asking the questions here, we're asking the question about some of those other bodies too. So I'm not going to do that tonight, but certainly glad to put that in the hopper.
Mr. Mayor?
Commissioner Wright?
Real quick, I think that my bond comment caused confusion. The bonds I'm thinking about are the ones that the Classic Center is going down the road with to get.
Not the SPLOST bonds.
Not ours. Ours is set. Ours is a great rate. And my point that I meant to make, and maybe I can make it now, is that as this moves forward, the rates are so good that they also can get a favorable bond rate that is going to allow them to have less of a payment, which means more money to do what they need to do, which could include the renewable energy increased initial costs, which are going to be less costs on the operational end. And perhaps the motion on the floor could be tabling it till the March voting meeting, giving it a set time.
Okay, two
Commissioner Neesmith?
Two things. One is, you may recall a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about things like living wage and procurement for disadvantaged and local businesses, that the attorney pointed out to us that the language already said that the Classic Center has to comply with our policies at the time, all the time, as they change. And so that means that if we, as we hope we do, if we come up with a policy for disadvantaged and local businesses getting some sort of preference in the procurement process, and if we come up with a policy about a living wage, that whether we have that policy next month or next year, it will apply to the Classic Center and everybody else. So I don't think there's an urgency. I support what you're after, but I think we don't have to go forward with it now. We just need to get working on it. The same with the small and disadvantaged local businesses. That same procurement policy needs to be worked on, which the mayor's already mentioned once tonight. So I think we're all right there if we just, get there.
Commissioner Thornton?
And I guess that's why I think it's so important that we do have other eyes and other ears feeding into this. I mean, it was something that definitely I thought this was pretty much a done deal. And now there seems to be a lot of questions. But I just want to make sure I understand about the bond rate. And I think Allison kind of answered it for me. Point to him.
He can answer.
Because, I just want to make sure that does this impact, because the Classic Center will have to get bonds too with their stuff. Delaying it, does that hurt them in any kind of way of getting a lower or higher bond? If, you said the timing was right and all of that, if we delay it, is that good rate still going to be there when we come back to the table for the Classic Center?
And if I knew that, I wouldn't be your city manager. No, it's a very good question, and I appreciate that, and I think Commissioner Wright made an excellent point. Right now, and based on, again, it's not just the interest rate environment, which is favorable, but it's also, again, the rating of this government that allowed us to get that. The Classic Center, I'm not sure what their bond rating is, but I think the point's well taken. It's a lower cost for borrowing money. And so the public understands the unified government, the voters of Athens-Clarke County approved a referendum that would advance $34 million for the arena project. I think the total estimated cost was around $80. And so the Classic Center was going to try to do the balance in another bond issuance. And that's what's the question now, and that's what you're asking.
Yes.
And we just don't know what the future will bring. Certainly, I don't expect it to rapidly change in a month. But if you push it out much longer than that, the interest rates could change.
Okay.
Markedly.
Commissioner Edwards?
So as part of this agreement, the government is transferring the land where the hotel site, the planned hotel, will be developed. We are transferring that land to the Classic Center Authority to enable the hotel development. Correct, Attorney Drake?
Correct.
So, further, this government is transferring the land that the senior housing development will be developed. We're transferring that land, we're giving it to the Economic Development Authority, correct, Attorney Drake? Is it?
Correct.
Is it, I'm trying to wrap my head around how we can place some sort of covenant on this land requiring green energy development. And I'm having trouble getting there. If I'm attacking the problem of green energy development for new construction in Athens-Clarke County, I think I might pull off a green building ordinance, that would require all new construction in certain zones to comply with green energy infrastructure improvements. I know a green building ordinance was on hold for many years in the previous administration. I think that might be the best route for this body to take if we're going to place requirements on new construction. I don't see how we get there through a land conveyance and placing conditions on land that we're going to convey in this moment right here. Do you see where I'm going?
Well, I do.
Mike?
I think, you make a good point there. You don't really define in your resolution where you say you want all, what that means for, I forgot what that means. It's similar to what you're talking about with the living wage and similar to what you're talking about with the small business ordinance, minority ordinance.
I mean, I understand with the.
So you could do it by adopting an ordinance, or you could do it by, you could specify for purposes of this agreement what that will mean. I mean, you could do that and make that a condition of the, any structure built as a condition of them accepting the conveyance. So you could do that.
Okay.
But we're going to have to come up with some terms. I mean, it's how specific this body wants to be ultimately, and how, and what, yeah.
So we could place a covenant on this land before we convey it.
Absolutely. You could do that.
I've not yet heard from Commissioner Davenport. I see.
Call the question. We've been beating this dead horse for a minute, so.
Obviously, we need to talk about it.
That's, we got a lot to talk about, so there's a motion on the floor.
I believe request to call the question requires a vote. And so I'm going to ask, I think just once the request to call that automates a vote, and so I'm going to ask Clerk Spratland to do a roll call on calling the question.
And what?
We're voting on whether we are going to vote.
Going to vote immediately.
Oh, whether we're going to
Voting on
vote.
whether we're going to.
Calling the question as an immediate vote.
Okay.
Wait, on tabling, are we calling the question on the table motion?
No, the vote, is if we're going to vote.
It would necessitate that it goes to the substitute motion,
is-
since that's the one standing.
I'm sorry, which standing?
So the substitute motion is the motion on the floor.
What is that?
The substitute motion is the tabling motion that you made.
Okay, so we're voting to whether to vote on the table.
Yeah.
I believe, I'm not the parliamentarian, but I believe that Commissioner Davenport's proposal is to call the question, which requires us to vote on whether we want to stop discussion.
Yes.
That's the first thing.
Yes, and so
Before
that's
anything else.
what we do first. So Davenport to call the question.
Yes.
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 No.
Yes.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
7 yes, 3 no.
All right, so we're moving forward to that vote on the motion that's on the floor, which is the motion made from Commissioner Neesmith. I apologize, I've forgotten now who the second is.
I think it was.
There were like four of them there.
We're going to call that Commissioner Link. We're going to call it a motion from Commissioner Neesmith with a second from Commissioner Link to hold this item. I would like to have an
30 days or
indicated.
less.
All right, motion is to hold this item.
Can I get some clarification on that? What are we exactly asking when we hold it? What are we asking to have happen?
That it come back before this body.
Well, I know that.
At our March voting meeting.
I mean, but what are they going to be doing during the month's time?
I think the attorney has heard the issues that have to do with how or If,
I'm not worried about the attorney, Jerry. I'm the one voting on this, so I need to
I
figure out
understand,
why
it.
we're
we're going to
holding it.
ask the attorney to give us this information.
What information specifically?
I'm
That's
about-
what he's saying.
I'm going to tell you.
As Chair would have heard, is that there was some question about the specificity of the conveyance of the ground lease for the senior site and the hotel site. Probably most significantly in terms of the discussion, question about how and if the renewable energy requirement could be placed upon the program writ large, again, with a kind of subset of questions around how could that be applied to the hotel and the senior condominium site.
And what was the first one you said about the senior citizen site? What was the first one? You just mumbled.
What could be the terms of that conveyance? There were questions about living wage and probably more discussion about the questions about green energy. So I'm going to recognize Commissioner Hare and then Manager Williams.
And also living wage? Was that going to be part of that for next month?
That was a question that emerged in commission conversation. Commissioner Hare?
I have a question for our attorney. On a motion to end discussion, is it possible to have a reconsideration of that vote? Because I would like to hear from Director Kramer, who's sitting out in the audience. Or are we done?
I think under the rules, y'all's rules, somebody who voted.
On the winning side has to
On
approve
the
that.
winning side has to make the motion.
We haven't voted yet.
We voted 7 to 3 to
Voted.
close off discussion. And I'm asking if any of the 7
Y'all
would be
did vote,
willing
yeah.
to reconsider that, so we might hear from Director Kramer.
A call is not a motion.
Y'all voted, it was 7-3, wasn't it?
Mhm.
To close discussion.
Oh, to close discussion, you're right, Mr. Sir, yep.
Not a motion.
There's no more discussion though unless you open it back up, so you couldn't hear from,
Well, that's my question.
yeah. So I think if a member on the winning side voted to reopen the question, you could do that.
So
Without further discussion.
I can reopen it for the information that
And I can
Commissioner
second
Hare.
it.
Sorry, that is not right.
Is it not?
You don't think you can make a motion? I think you can do that.
As Chair, I'm going to allow for Commissioner Wright to put
A motion on.
a reopening of discussion on the floor. Would anyone like to second that?
I'll second it.
All right. So
Let me make a
Commissioner-
comment on this.
Commissioner
We're
Wright is.
giving ourselves 30 days for Mr. Kramer to have all the input and information that he wants. And most valuable to him would be after the attorney has put the options that are possible, and then Mr. Kramer can reflect on those options.
So Commissioner Wright has motion on the floor to reopen discussion. Commissioner Thornton, thank you, has seconded that. All in favor of reopening discussion, say aye.
Aye.
No.
All right. Any opposed? Now it's time to say no.
No.
All right. Roll call, please. The ayes, or excuse me, roll call beginning with Commissioner Wright.
Wright.
Yes, yes.
Dennison.
No.
Neesmith.
No.
Edwards.
Yes.
Harrod.
Yes.
Thornton.
Yes.
Hamby.
Yes.
Davenport.
No.
Parker.
No.
Link.
No.
It's 5 yes, 5 no.
Good time. The mayor is going to close discussion for right now. So we are then going to vote on motion to hold till our March voting meeting. All right. And the motion rose from Commissioner Neesmith, second from Commissioner Link.
Just to clarify, I think the motion, I meant for it to be for 30 days or less. If we could come back for a special call meeting with the information, that would be great. So, yes.
30 days or less.
Yes.
Commissioner Neesmith?
Yes.
Edwards?
No.
Harrod.
Yes.
Thornton.
Can you come back to me? No.
Hamby.
Yes.
Davenport.
Yes.
Parker.
Yes.
Link.
Yes.
Wright.
No.
Denson.
Yes.
7 yes, 3 no.
All right. So within 30 days, we will have some more conversation. All right.
If I might, just because we're right here, right now, and just expectations in the public and everything, I would suggest that, that when you ponder this, that it could be that the alternative as well is for the Classic Center to be able to purchase offsets, because such a big building that's operated at night, it may not be economically feasible, to be 100%. So you may have to do offsets. So just to manage everybody's expectations, that might be part of the conversation.
Thank you, Manager. All right, we're moving on to item number 19. This is the Firefly Trail Project, which is a TSPLOST project from 2018. This is a property exchange that's been in the works for some time.
So moved.
Third. All right, I've got a motion from Commissioner Wright, second from Commissioner Neesmith, input from Commissioner Parker.
I just wanted to make a note that the original owner of this property's name is misspelled in the exchange agreement. Does that matter? Like consistently across the exchange agreement, at every written instance of the proprietor's name.
Attorney, can that be noted as a Scrivener's error?
Okay. Yeah, that's cool.
Well, the correct spelling is M-O-N at the end, not M-A-N. That's
Yeah,
right.
I just wanted to make a note and make sure that's okay, that we can move ahead with it this evening.
Yeah.
Oh, the one at our desk is corrected? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Great, well, let's do this.
I want to make a comment. I want to
Commissioner Neesmith.
I want to thank the attorney for working with the landowner and his representative, and I want to thank the landowner and his representative for being flexible and getting this done.
All right, I've got a motion from Commissioner Wright, second from Commissioner Neesmith. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, we are now moving to that time when we have public hearing and deliberation on recommendations from the Athens-Clarke County Planning Commission. We have two of those items this evening. Rules of public input are only slightly different. There is the opportunity for a 10-minute segment of public input from anyone for or against either of these items. Regarding item number 20, nobody signed up for the 10 minutes. All right, so given that that's the case, there's an opportunity on number 20 for 3 minutes of public input from anyone with us this evening. So would anyone like to address item number 20?
Hello, I'm Chris Church, 194 Highland Park Drive. First, I'd like to thank you guys, the mayor, commission, and the citizens of Clarke County for their willingness to support those of us in recovery. Recovery from substance use disorder is a growing movement, and there's a real big effort now to reduce stigma around the disease and the impressions that involves, and the people, the images that people have. The terminology is a halfway house, and sometimes that can stir up some negative thoughts and impacts. We are a sober living facility. I live in the neighborhood on Highland Park Drive, and it's a great neighborhood, and I actually lived at Freedom from Bondage 11 years ago when I came to Athens to get sober, and I have 11 years sober, and it's just wonderful, and I see a lot of good happening. Clarke County is very generous in helping the recovery community. There are lots of other resources like ours in town, and I just wanted to thank you for that, and thank you for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Church. Any other input on item number 20? All right, hearing none, we'll come behind the rail for discussion. I believe this is in Commissioner Haird's district.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I said at the agenda setting meeting, I think this is a reasonable request. I think it will be helping large numbers of people, and the fact that there is going to be an on-site manager, I think, is really to be commended, and will ensure that everything is done according to the way in which it should be. So I'm going to make a motion to approve, but I was going to ask, it's going to come back in 6 months, is that correct? So we don't make a motion to approve, or just to come back in 6 months? Okay.
For official action, you hold the public hearing tonight, and then you wait for a minimum of 6 months, maximum of 9, we'll get it back on your agenda probably in August, and at that point, you will vote.
Okay, well, I'm going to wait 6 months then.
Any other input on this item, number 20? All right, moving on to item number 21. I believe, Clerk, there's no one signed up for the 10 minutes on this either. All right, so any public input on item number 21? And just give us your name, and you have 3 minutes.
All right, thanks. My name's Dan Beynart. I live at 384 Nakuchi Avenue. I own the property that's up for rezone with my partner Levin MacDougald, who's here. We just see this as a positive improvement on the neighborhood. The Planning Commission's report showed that it's compatible with the zoning and the ordinance. The CN makes sense in terms of the property's location and the surrounding properties. We feel like we have good support from our Commissioner, Melissa Link, and the Planning Department. You know, they felt it was good to approve. We think it'll be a positive impact on the street and the neighborhood. The building is really dependent on this rezone in order to be redeveloped, you know, to make it a viable piece of property. We just think it's an appropriate rezone, and I encourage you to vote yes. And we feel like we appreciate all the work you guys do. You guys have a lot of tough decisions to make, and we feel like we bring you an easy one tonight. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Beynart. Any other input on item number 21? All right, and this is in Commissioner Link's district.
Yeah, I feel like this is an easy decision, and I want to thank the planning office for working with the applicant. And I know it looks a little weird having this CN zone, but the way this is with the commercial general zone butting up against what is a single-family neighborhood, I think this CN zone acts as an appropriate buffer between that heavy commercial general usage and the existing neighborhood, and I think it'll bring a lot of improvement to that property. So I'd like to motion that we accept this.
Second.
All right, and there's an ordinance to read.
An ordinance to amend the Code of Athens-Clarke County, Georgia with respect to rezoning 2 parcels of land totaling approximately 0.28 acres located at 202-206 Evans Street from RS8, single-family residential, to CN commercial neighborhood and for other purposes.
All right, I have a motion from Commissioner Link. I think the second was from Commissioner Edwards.
Yes.
All right, any other input on this item? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. All right, we move on next, as is our standard operating procedure, to citizen input on any item not on this evening's agenda. Rules of citizen input are the same as for earlier opportunities. There's a 3-minute opportunity. The light on Clerk Spratlin's desk will turn green when you begin speaking. It will turn yellow when you have 30 seconds remaining, and red when the 3 minutes is up. Again, as with earlier times, please fill out the card that is on the table and hand that to the attorney right in front of the table. That will allow us to accurately capture your name. So, good evening.
Good evening. Glad I beat the crowd. My name is Alan Jones, 195 Xavier Drive. Tim, Allison, Andy, Mike, Kelly, thank you for stating your willingness to explore the value of updating our repaving standards to narrow our in-town roadway lanes with speeds of 45 miles per hour or lower, from the freeway size of 12 feet wide to the city size of 10 feet. Not that I've heard from anyone here that has stated an opinion that is contrary to that, so don't leave anybody out. I've offered y'all a lot of supporting evidence on this, and I can't find any modern research or regulatory literature that says this is unadvisable. It slows speed, it reduces the number and severity of crashes without adding to congestion or otherwise negatively impacting the overall throughput or safety for cars, buses, trucks, emergency vehicles, bikes, or pedestrians. But I've given that talk before. Tonight I want to show you the money by restating 3 examples. I'm oversimplifying a bit, but let's start with Broad and Atlanta Highway. From downtown to Millage, Broad has 10-foot lanes and speeds are fairly well controlled. East of Hancock, the road widens to 3 12-foot lanes in each direction, and the race is on. If the lanes were narrowed, cars would naturally drive slower and less police enforcement expense would be required, as well as fewer ambulance rides. Athens in Motion has listed adding bike lanes on Broad and Atlanta Highway from Millage to Mitchell Bridge as a high-priority project at their estimated average cost of $11.3 million. By narrowing the traffic lanes to 10 feet, you'd have 6 feet of extra asphalt on each side of the road for protected bike lanes, mainly at the cost of paint. Same with Lexington, another top-tier bike project. Here you could turn $12.3 million into paint. Eventually, North Avenue is slated for bike lanes. Using paint instead of the estimated $3.7 million, you'd get 2 5-foot bike lanes and could do so at the next repaving cycle. Saving so far $27 million in bike infrastructure alone, and more importantly, the potential life of loved ones of at least someone here in the room tonight. So please, do your own due diligent research on this, and then pick a major road slated to be repaved, and 6 months ahead of time, repaint it to 10 feet and add some free bike lanes. Then see how it goes. If citizens can't get used to it, and after 6 months still don't like it, when you repave, make them 10-foot 5. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Hey, good evening. My name is Bob Gadd. My address is 134 Milton Road in Winterville. There you go. Late back in August, I received a phone call from a paramedic who thought I'd be interested in a call National EMS had run. The caller wished to remain anonymous for fear of retaliation, and this is something I could personally relate to. He told me of an ambulance called to Barrow Elementary for a child having an allergic reaction severe enough for an EpiPen to be administered. 911 was called, and as it turned out, a parent had arrived to the school, waited for the ambulance, eventually gave up on it, and took the child to the hospital themselves. The reason I bring this up now is to emphasize, if I hadn't received that phone call, this incident never would have come to light and would have been swept under the rug. National addressed this call not to be transparent, but because they got caught. The simple solution is to prevent this from happening again is to have ACC dispatch take over all 911 calls, including medical calls. This solution was not only the idea of one of your fellow commissioners, but it's also recommended by your own police department. Please fully fund this needed improvement in your 2021 budget, or better yet, look at existing funds to get the ball rolling now. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Gadd.
Okay, my name is Hattie Thomas Whitehead. I am a first descendant of Leonardtown. I just want everybody to know that I didn't have a choice of my sex, my race, my parents, or where I was born. But I was born in Leonardtown, so that's why I'm standing here tonight. I was born to Abe and Laura Thomas, 439 South Finley, and then moved to 141 Peabody Street. I tell my story through pain and gratitude. I saw what happened in Leonardtown. I saw my parents and my neighbors, the hurt that went through them when urban renewal and the University of Georgia, I'm going to say, took the property with little money to give to them. Some of us had nowhere to go. Some of us had to move with relatives. Some of us had to move wherever they could, work with people and move in the back of the big house. Because we had no way of getting a loan because we had meager wages that were paid because we were a working community. We worked. The kids went to school. We had carpenters. We had plumbers. We had all a supportive neighborhood to be one day a middle class. But all that was taken from us. All that was taken from us then. The city, the university, and senators were all together. So when our parents and the neighborhood went to reach out to someone for help, they had nobody to go to. Where are you going to? Who are you going to talk to? They had nobody to go to. So they were kicked out. There were a lot of harassment went in the neighborhood. Streets were cut off. Bulldozers started up at night. It was terrible. We saw houses burned. We saw houses that was pushed down. But our descendants had nobody to go to at that time. Nobody. When you can't go to your city, government, who are you going to turn to? This was before integration. This was in the 60s. We have the data. And we got the data that what happened. So since we got the data,
good evening, everybody. My name is Sam Raffle, 230 Spalding Circle, Athens. Though I'm here to speak on another issue, I would like to add my voice to those calling for commissioners to support the Lennon resolution, because there's never a wrong time to do the right thing, and if not now, when? I also want to take a minute to address the inaccurate and misleading letter defending National EMS's failure to dispatch the fire department or get an ambulance to Barrow Elementary for a 5-year-old having a severe allergic reaction. But this is what happens when you pull 911 ambulances from their coverage zones to run non-emergency transports. Their letter to the flagpole, among other things, blamed our 911 center for not dispatching the fire department. The magnitude of this deception indicates either an incredible lack of understanding of the system that they are running or a deliberate attempt to deceive the public and elected officials, or both. None of it's reassuring, and I will let my letter in this week's flagpole stand for itself, speak for itself. But why are they so afraid of transparency? I've heard this asked more than once. To me, it's a rhetorical question. They're afraid of transparency for the same reason some organizations are always afraid of transparency, because they're afraid of the truth. But the truth matters. And at the July work session, you were told multiple times and very clearly that National EMS was a department of both hospitals, just like the ERs, their radiology department, their surgery departments. This was used as a justification to Commissioner Parker to maintain secrecy over this public safety process involving our 911. But as my son Noah likes to say, there's just one little problem. It's just simply not true. They're not a department of the hospital. The truth matters, or at least it used to. We remain committed to open meetings, open records, and honesty in compliance with state law and public safety. 2, fully funding as soon as possible the ACCPD recommendation to take over all 911 dispatching. 3, protected 911. 4, an immediate end to the practice of using taxpayer-subsidized 911 ambulances to run people home from the hospital. And lastly, a study to analyze the cost of upgrading our first fire response from EMT to paramedic. We have 9 fire stations dispersed around the county, and this would get life-saving medicines and procedures to critically ill and injured patients much quicker. It would save lives, period. As always, thank you for your time and your service to our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Raffle.
My name is Bobby Crook, and I'm here to speak on Lennontown, which was a black community in the 60s that was taken by the city of Athens and the University of Georgia. Lennontown was a totally black community. There were whites in proximity to Lennontown, and I want to make that clear that it was whites in proximity to Lennontown. When they took Lennontown, they swept through. We had, as we have here, we can jostle back and forth about this and that. Our parents had no outlet. We had nobody that said, well, let's go downtown and say what Lennontown means to us. It meant nothing to us, as though we were nobody. And I'm standing here now to ask Patrick Davenport, I want to call you out. You were for the resolution at first, and you seem to change your mind. Okay, now you are on the council. You're one of the councilmen now. You'll be a councilman for just a while, but you will be a black man for the rest of your life. Just remember that. And this is what we are talking about. We cannot move forward as a city by letting the University of Georgia just take everything. And especially us black people, I know we poor people, so they the easiest. We can take their land, we can take this, and we can take that. We had prime property in Lennontown, which is Bromby Hall, Russell Hall, Crestwell Hall. We had prime property. I could stand there and look at Sanford Stadium in our bedroom. I could see the 50-yard line. That was taken from us. Parents, people were crying. I come home, I was 11 years old, people crying and like something had died. And I was wondering what was going on. They said the University of Georgia is taking our house. They making us move. My family, the Crook family, Roy and Esty Crook, they bought their house in 1938, 167 Peabody. Just imagine a black family buying a house in 1938. And then it come in 1965, it's taken away for a little of nothing. And so what I'm standing here for is for the city council and the mayor to acknowledge the fact and do something about it.
Thank you, Mr. Crook.
Hello, Mayor, Commissioners. My name is Geneva Johnson, 123 Linden Road, Lennontown. My daddy bought a house over there in 1948. In 1964, they told us we had to leave. When Daddy told them, that's when we was black now. Now they saying we was part of it, saying white. Y'all, if I was white, y'all should have told me back then that that black girl that had to stand and watch the cars while this participant went over there and looked at the game. Don't let nothing happen to those cars, because it did. My mom and dad had to pay for it. I'm going to tell y'all the real thing. My dad owned this house. Hard-working man. Mama worked at Snelling Hall. Daddy worked at the Fine Arts Building. And then, before then, they worked at Baldwin Hall over there, where they found out some graves, slave graves and things. That's where my dad and mama was working first. But this little black girl, I was black then, had to stand and watch the cars. Make sure nobody didn't do anything to them. If they did, they would have charged my mom and dad. Mama was making $7 a week. Dad was making $8. Me, it was more. That's what was going on in Lennontown. And then they supposed to have paved out streets. You know what they did? They took a street scraper and scraped the street, killing the erosion of the land, of the road. And when it rained, it was like a river. But the white people's over there, back over there on Cloverhurst, going to Bloomfield, they had paved streets. Now, everything is gone. You go over there, you can't tell that black people live over there 100% black. Thank God for Joey Carter, Rochelle, Joe. Thank God for Willa Fambro. Thank God for the mayor who been to my house. He been in there. They said we was living in shacks. My dad had moved their house from Peabody, this is hard, right over there to 1550 East Broad, and I'm living in it now. It's not a shack, it's a home and a good one. Y'all can come and see it, but you gotta make an appointment with Geneva. Just don't drop in now. Man, I get in there. I'm telling you about Lennontown. We had prosperous people. I got prosperous daughters, sons, children, granddaughters. We wasn't dummies. My dad worked hard. Sometimes he worked so hard he didn't see his children. He would take them over there to the Fine Art Building, the boiler room, where he shoved coal. He's come on, y'all play, so he could see his children. Working from morning, late at night. Mama did the same thing. And then when they had to want to take it, when Daddy said, I don't want to sign, you know what they told him? Snowball, that was his nickname. You don't have a choice. My name is Geneva Johnson, 123 Linden Road, daughter of Carrie and David Johnson. Thank you. Y'all have a good night.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson.
My name is Joseph Carter. I live at 175 Oglethorpe Avenue. I am the project coordinator for the Lennontown project. And we are here. And to quote Geneva, we're not going anywhere. We have sat down with many of you to go through this resolution that all of you have seen. Some of you support it, I want to thank Mariah Parker, Melissa Link, especially Melissa, because she was the first person who told me that there were rumblings of a neighborhood. And there were no rumblings. This was a place that was completely decimated. I'm Tim Denson, who's my commissioner. I want to thank you. Commissioner Thornton, for your support and your wisdom on how to proceed. We spoke with you, Mayor Gertz, last Wednesday. And I want to tell the public what I told you. Last year, when we were organizing for the Coalition for Recognition and Redress for Baldwin Hall, I approached you to sign the letter that would be sent to the president. And you told me that you would not sign it because you needed to take care of your house first. Well, Lennon is in your house because your predecessors took it from all of the residents, unilaterally used the power of the city and the state through UGA, the University System of Georgia, and the federal government. It is not just what you owe to them. It is what you are obligated to do as a human being. You told us that you would help us to set up a team to actually put the resolution at work. I want you to honor that because we will hold you accountable. Because you are not accountable to the university or to the federal government. You are accountable to us, your citizens, who are standing in this room. Please, no, you must support Lennon in this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carter.
Hey, Carol Myers, 260 Spalding Circle. I'm speaking tonight also in regard to the Linnetown project. I'm supportive of the residents of the destroyed Linnetown community and those working on their behalf. I'm also supportive of the commissioners in their desire to work with the Linnetown project to make their proposed resolution a reality. Working together on shaping and implementing community resolutions is a messy, time-consuming, and tension-filled process. We're in the middle of that now, and I am hopeful that it will get worked out. 2 weekends ago, I attended the Athens Social Justice Symposium and heard the stories of Hattie Whitefield, Geneva Johnson, and Bobby Crook, who just all spoke to you, about their lives as children and teenagers. I was deeply moved. What they and their families lost is immeasurable in terms of community lost and measurable in terms of the values of the properties their family lost. I want to thank them for sharing their stories and their families' losses with us. I promised 2 weeks ago I would speak tonight, and I'm here. Over the Christmas holiday, I read this book, The Color of Law. In that book, the author argues that in addition to de facto segregation across the country, that there was de jure segregation enacted through government actions. The Linnetown story could have been cited in that book as an example of the urban renewal programs cited by the author to, I'm quoting, clear slums not only for highways, but for hospitals, universities, middle-class housing, and offices. We as a community owe it to the residents of Linnetown to recognize their stories and our government's involvement in the destruction of their homes and community by working with them to develop a resolution that will work for them and for the community as a whole. We also owe it to our larger African American population to also recognize this history of other lost African communities like the Bottom on College Avenue, directly between the train station that used to be in downtown and the waterfront that was on the east side of the Oconee by North Avenue. As I read this book, I also wondered about all the Black Athenians whose family wealth was limited because of subdivisions that were restricted by color and then by zoning restrictions, which more or less did the same thing, and how the FHA and VA loans that were available to my parents' generation were not available to the parents of Black Athenians my age because of racism built into how those loans were awarded. In addition to working with the Linnetown community and their resolution, I hope we will also commit ourselves to documenting and honoring the losses of the larger African American community and to recognize the positive role of African Americans in the history of Athens. Daydreaming today, I thought about how I'd love to see our community honor African Americans in our downtown public art, like we're doing for our music community, especially since we're restricted by state law from removing all the statues downtown honoring the Confederacy. And how I'd love to see the city dedicate some space downtown, like the water building that my sister keeps texting me about, into a museum for a local African American history. There's so much that we need to do and should do. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Myers.
Commissioner, Mr. Mayor, my name is Jeff Kelly. I live at 234 Deering Street. I am here, firstly, I must confess, I feel somewhat humbled. And upon reflection, just waiting in line, I feel like my concern is somewhat trivial in comparison, but ultimately it's not. Because we all deserve to live in a safe community. I'm guessing you're somewhat aware that approximately 3 weeks ago, a UGA student was sexually assaulted on the corner of Deering and Church Street, not 100 meters from my property. I'm here just to address what I consider to be simple concerns of public safety. Improved or increased illumination, not just on my street, but on adjacent streets. Deering Street is the primary pedestrian traffic corridor from downtown UGA to neighborhoods immediately west of downtown, to Millage, the sororities, the fraternities, to Rock Springs, to Clark Central. Our street is somewhat well illuminated, but adjacent streets are not. Our street has sidewalks, adjacent streets do not. So I'm here to ask that, given we're beginning the budgetary cycle, you consider public safety in my neighborhood and others to improve and increase lighting. It's going to be very difficult. I don't understand the legality of it with right-of-ways and whatnot, but we need sidewalks in my community. I have children that play in my community. I have children that walk our dogs in our community, and I am not alone. We have had 2 meetings. We are active. We are engaged. The first of which was attended by both lead detectives in this case. It was also attended by the mother and sister of the victim. She was assaulted not just across the street from the front door to her apartment. The second meeting was attended by Commissioner Edwards. Thank you. He's very engaged and very active. He has walked the neighborhood at night with myself and another neighbor. We've addressed some areas where we think lighting could go. I'm here to ask for lighting and sidewalks. I'm here to ask for your money. But I'm also here to ask that you include us in the process, because I want to be methodical about it. What types of lighting are appropriate in certain situations? I don't want my neighborhood lit up like Disneyland, but I think a UGA college student, or anybody for that matter, should be safe walking the blocks to and from their place of work, school, entertainment, recreation, and home. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly.
Good evening. My name is Julie Roth, and I'm at 146 Deering Street, and I, too, like my neighbor Jeff, feel a little small right now because of the larger issues that are being discussed here with injustices and all that have been delivered over generations in our community. However, the rape of the student on Church Street and Deering Street has really shaken our neighborhood. Our neighbors no longer feel safe at night. We are all doing our part by trying to tastefully illuminate our properties. Some people have gone so far as to install cameras, which is not a great alternative, but we are feeling a little desperate at this point because of this. There have been lots of petty crimes committed in the neighborhood, but this rape last month has really shaken us. And then in the fourth quarter of last year, there was actually an armed robbery as well on Waddell Street. So the neighborhood is living in a little bit of fear right now, and we do really hope to look to the commission to bring us some additional lighting and improved lighting on Deering Street, on Waddell Street, and then the cross streets of Pope, Church, and Harris. Again, Deering Street is one of the most historic streets in town. If you go to any visitor center, out-of-towners are always instructed one of the first stops should be to see the tree that owns itself, which is on Deering Street. So we have people, hundreds of pedestrians throughout a day that come through our street between students, out-of-town guests, and the residents. So please consider us. Please put a little money in the budget for us to improve our lighting and to help us take back our streets. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ms. Roth.
Hello. My name is Jamal Johnson, 111 Lauren Lane, and I'm here to speak about the Lennon project. And what I have to say today is this. I am an Athenian, born here, born and raised my entire life. I know the history of our town. I know the history of the Black people who've lived in our town. My family has been in this town for generations. My grandmother had friends who lived in Lennon. I've heard Lennon spoken of before, family conversations and such. It wasn't until a couple of weeks ago that I heard about the project. And I'm here to lend my voice and my support to the Lennon project because as a young Black man who grew up here in Athens, the only Black neighborhoods, the only places where it's Black culture have been the projects of Athens. Black people have been removed from different parts of Athens, whether it be financially, socially, or through any other means. Lennon is, not only was it a place that these were not thugs, these were not slums, these were not people who were a threat to society, but simply due to the color of their skin and the nature of their birth, they were removed from a place where they had made a community, a place where they could raise their children, where generations of their family could go back home. This place no longer exists. Instead, there are dorms there. Dorms for a college that also has a history of excluding Black applicants. Now, up until probably a good 20 years ago, UGA had a really good track record of denying most of their Black applicants. Nowadays, you'll see, and you can see some of them standing around in the back of this room supporting this movement right now. Now you see students of all different races at UGA. But that does not change the fact that UGA put their hands in the pot and stole this land from the people who owned it. The residents of Lennon were not there because they were squatting. They did not come there begging. They were working class. Each and every one of them worked every day. As we heard Ms. Johnson say, her father would work and have to bring his children to his job just to see them. These working class citizens of Athens, Georgia, were removed from their homes. None of you here were on that council. None of you here personally did anything to remove those people from their homes. So this project isn't about blaming you for the mistakes of the past. But who you are right now is a council of people who have not only the ability or the power, but the duty to the African American populace of this city to make it right.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Good evening. My name is Jesse Houle, 145 Three Oaks Drive. I am also here to speak about the Lennon project and their resolution, which at this point I trust you all have read. Joey thanked the 4 commissioners who have come out publicly to support this resolution. I would like to thank the 6 of y'all who gave us an excuse to fill this room with people tonight to demonstrate where the real power is in this community, because it's with the people. There is no doubt that the city of Athens performed a diabolical handshake with the state and the University of Georgia. You can call it what you want, and you can soften the language if you feel personally necessary, but the residents of Lindentown were exploited, disrespected, intimidated, and terrified, and they were terrorized by white institutions, including the city government and the University of Georgia. You can call it what you want, but what we have today is white supremacy that's directly tied to actions like this throughout the entire history on this land since colonialism. Because white people in this town still hold power disproportionately to black people, because black people are still disproportionately in poverty, incarcerated, and terrorized day to day, albeit in ways that are often more subtle than it was back in the 60s. There's been lots of talk about how this is very difficult and complicated to tackle. But there's nothing more difficult and nothing more complicated than to do what the residents of Lindentown have done after living through this very thing, to come into this city hall, once populated by the people who terrorized them, and stand before a still largely white, still majority white male commission and demand recognition and redress, neither of which have they gotten any of yet from this institution. Right now, for a so-called progressive body, for you to have their back should be easy. And they didn't just make noise, they wrote the whole resolution for you, complete with pages of footnotes. Step by step, what you can do. All you gotta say is, I got your back. To put it in modern terms, Control-C, Control-V. Then you put their resolution on the committee and discuss with public input in a public process that loops in the people who were and are directly affected what, if anything, needs to be changed. So far, only public reasoning I've heard given to why this can't be supported is to try to get UGA to the table. But you don't need to do their dirty work for them. You don't need to make concessions on their behalf. Let them make concessions. Let them demand that the language be weakened. Let them say they don't have the resources. Do we need to get UGA behind this? Absolutely. But this body has power. You yourselves, each of you, have power. The question is, do you have the courage? You have the power to be the example. You have the power to enact material redress. Do you have the courage to do the right thing? Y'all get the last word tonight, so when you go around, you have an opportunity for everyone in this room to feel a sense of victory with you. Commissioner Neesmith, my commissioner, many people here know I'm running, and I would love for this to not be something we disagree on. I would love for you and everyone else to just say, yes, I support the Lindentown resolution, and we can march out of here together.
Thank you, Mr. Houle.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Philip Tapley. I'm at 270 Barber Street. I'm here to speak on behalf of the Lindentown resolution. I'm an organizer for Athens Area Democratic Socialists of America. I'm among the progressives in town that have been encouraged by many of the directions of this body. I'm also among the growing number of Athenians who are frustrated that some among this body seem to be balking at certain language in this resolution. I find myself asking, whose side are we on here? Those of us in this body, those of us who claim to fight for a more equal and just world, Athenians in general, are we prioritizing avoiding uncomfortable language, avoiding ruffling feathers, those in high places? Or are we prioritizing boldly pursuing justice for those victims of past wrongdoing and making all of the communities in Athens whole? I just want to raise a couple points of context as we think about this issue. First, that this injustice occurred during a time that followed a legacy of Holocaustal levels of violence against slaves, black slaves, and generations of white terrorism against black Americans. And there's one of those phrases that we want to stay away from, but we got to tell it like it is: white terrorism against black Americans. It wasn't long before the residents of Lindentown were removed that black Americans were going to grave measures just to officially be recognized as indeed as equal as their peers in this country. Lindentown was hot on the heels of the civil rights movement. So think about the time that this occurred. And I want to add just one more bit of context. Think about how central and important the concept of home is to meaningful freedom. The dignity of having a place that is yours and where you belong. That's a privilege I've had my whole life. Perhaps many people in this room have, but not everyone does. Many people in Athens tonight do not have that privilege. Residents of Linentown, despite all that was stacked against them, had fought for and secured that dignity. But the white power structures in this town, and again, boogeyman language, but we got to call it like it is, took it away from them. Why and how? Because they wanted to and because they could. Think about that. So I'll humbly close here by asking the mayor and the commission to reflect on the nature and the magnitude of this injustice, and to please ask yourself, whose side are you on? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tapley.
My name is Trisha White, 755 East Broad Street. I'm a student at the University of Georgia, and this is my first town hall meeting, but there are a couple familiar faces before me. Commissioner Edwards, you actually came to speak at UGA a few years ago, and you talked to us about how important it is to step off of campus and take that responsibility to be a part of your local community. And I can't think of a better way to become a part of this community than to support the Linentown resolution. Earlier, Jesse said that we needed to bring UGA to the table, but I am UGA, and there are so many students here that support this resolution and are so angered by the consistent behavior that we've seen from the university. We stood up when we were angered and discovered what happened at Baldwin, and we fought against administration to get those people recognized. And we're ready to do it again. Students on campus know about Linentown, and they're learning about it every day since the resolution has been publicly addressed. And so I just want you guys to know that I vote in Athens, and a lot of students vote in Athens, and I don't want you to discount the fact that students know what's going on. It's not just the campus bubble. We're here in the community, and we care about this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. White.
Hi, I'm Laura Davis from 406 Benning Street, and I am a lifelong resident of Athens, and I also am a UGA alumnus. My grandfather owned Pertit's TV on Baxter Street, which was across from Rock Springs, where I spent many childhood afternoons. I then spent 4 years at Clark Central and 10 years at UGA. I've recently moved to a not quite tiny house in the Rock Springs neighborhood, so the area of town around Baxter Street has always been near and dear to my heart. There have been so many instances of oppression and injustice throughout history that would be logistically impossible to make retribution for now, but fortunately, in the case of the Linentown neighborhood, we have living residents of that community and records documenting who was harmed by whom. We also have a city government and a university that can afford to make amends, not just with their words, but with their actions. This would be a small price to pay to restore justice and to acknowledge that Black history is history. The best thing about this is we would be setting a precedent for creating a more fair and just world. I'm asking you all to please do the right thing and support this resolution. And since I have a couple of seconds left, I would also like to mention once again my request that you all consider allowing tiny houses in Athens so that people can live more environmentally sustainably. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Davis.
Hi, my name is Zoe Love, and I'm a student at the University of Georgia. I'm here speaking as the Vice President of Students for Sensible Drug Policy. We're here to follow up on the reclassification of marijuana in Athens-Clarke County. Currently, marijuana is considered a Schedule I substance, which means that someone with a misdemeanor possession of less than 1 ounce can be arrested on site, and they'll carry with them a criminal record in addition to up to a $1,000 fine. I know that it's really difficult to coordinate with UGA and their police department, but we are really requesting that you could put this on the agenda as an item to be spoken on, because each month that passes, despite I know you guys are very busy working on things like Linentown and working on things like the Classic Center project, but each month that passes, there are citizens in Athens whose lives may be ruined by these consequences. The fines, in addition to the bond for being taken to jail, are really life-changing, and those financial difficulties I've seen can follow people through the rest of their life, into their old age, and eventually, into their death. I've made brief email contact with Commissioner Tim Denson, but I would love to continue to be in contact with anyone else, any other commissioners, or you, Mayor Gertz. We would love to work with y'all and see how we could really get some momentum behind this project and see how we could coordinate with the University of Georgia. I think it's really imperative that we take action on this. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you.
Evening, I'm Jeremy Person. I am at 100 Fox Road. I'm also a member of SSDP. I wanted to say first, I am incredibly shaken by the members of the Lenintown community, past and present, and I think that is something that absolutely needs to be considered. To my piece, I am here to talk about reclassification as well. Last time we spoke, there was mention of difficulty working out the language with UGA, and I want you to think about this whenever you're in talks to keep this question in mind. When it comes to reclassification, what are we saying? What are we saying as a progressive community when we contribute to socially regressive systems that profit from arrests, from feeding the notorious school-to-prison pipeline? Officers in the Atlanta area have acknowledged that citizens arrested for marijuana possession are disproportionately African American. That's 90% of arrests since 2013. These arrests land average citizens in prison for years at worst. At best, it follows them throughout the job market. It takes away their financial aid if they're students. Young, hardworking students, people who have plenty of time to learn from their mistakes instead of having to pay for them for the rest of their lives. Meanwhile, there is a 2019 joint study between Washington State and the Oregon Health Department that shows that arrest rates in 2012 and 2014 decreased significantly after the legalization of possession of small amounts of marijuana. Meanwhile, we, the progressive community, abide by a culture of alcohol abuse that contributes to egregious crimes like rape. I'm going to beg the inference here, but at UGA, there's an ongoing thing called the red zone. Maybe some of you have heard of it, maybe you haven't. It is the period between August and November when 50% of sexual assault cases on campus occur. 50%. In addition to that, 50% of sexual assault cases on college campuses across the nation are alcohol involved. Those are not good odds. What are we saying when we spend our resources on delaying reclassification instead of ensuring the safety of our students? And we've all heard about the potential medical benefits, the fiscal benefits, but I'm here talking about the societal benefits. What about easing some of the suffering in this community? Reclassification can be the step in the right direction that we need. So please think on this, share your thoughts, act on them. Help to continue the good work that the municipalities around us have done.
Thank you, Mr. Person.
Good evening. My name is Andrea Farnham. I live at 475 Brookwood Drive in District 8, and I'm here to speak in support of the Lenintown resolution. Whenever we talk about racial injustices of the past, there are three things that need to happen: recognition, redress, and reconciliation. My white people, we love to jump to the reconciliation part where everybody feels good and gets over the past, but we skip over the first and second part. The recognition, and freedom and rights require recognition. In order for this to be my pen, you have to recognize it as my pen. And for me to have rights, everyone around me has to recognize my humanity. And the part of recognizing what happened to the residents of Lenintown has to do with them telling the truth about what happened to them and the white terrorism that robbed them of wealth, education, pathways to accumulate what my ancestors did accumulate because their ancestors didn't, and what was stolen in terms of humanity, dignity, and recognition is the first step. And that is the step we're at tonight. And when we stumble on the first and easiest step, it says a lot about where we are culturally. That it's just the first step of saying, yes, this happened. Yes, these stories are true. Yes, the city colluded with the university to steal these homes. We as a community, as part of healing, are required to tell the truth. There is no path to healing that involves us pretending that this didn't happen, that these residents were not robbed. And we are still robbing Black Athenians. We still have a massive poverty rate that's directly tied to this legacy of stealing wealth, resources, and exploiting Black communities. That white terrorism still has its fingers in everything that happens in Athens, and that Black communities are disproportionately in poverty, disproportionately incarcerated, disproportionately exploited on the labor market, and the university continues to exploit Black labor in the same way that it did 50 years ago. And yet here we are afraid to tell the truth about the university's long-standing history of white terrorism and exploitation of Black bodies. And that in stealing these homes, robbed our brothers and sisters of the opportunity to build wealth, to build stability for their kids and grandkids. And redress looks like trying to make the situation whole. And what does that look like in terms of giving back land, scholarships, opportunities, and wealth?
Thank you, Ms. Farnham.
Good evening.
There's a call for a brief break. Commission rules indicate that if by 8:15 we have not concluded, that there will be a break. And so I'm asking everybody to hold that to 10 minutes. My clock says 8:29, and so that would make it 8:39 back in your seats. So we'll have that very brief break. All right, 30 seconds till we go live. All right, after a short break, we are back with full hearts and empty bladders. So thank you for joining us.
Good evening. If patience is a virtue and 7 is the number for perfection, truly I have reached it. I was 70 years old, and so I have been quite patient. I came tonight to give honor.
Ms. Bagby, just give us your name for the record, please.
My name is Mary P. Bagby. I live in Athens, 1442 East Broad Street. You can reach me at marypbagby12@gmail.com. I would like to honor Dr. King and his works and other people, other unsung heroes that names have not always been mentioned, with a poem that was written by A and Z. They wrote these poems in commemoration and celebration of them, Dr. King's birthday, and for that reason, I wanted to share it with you tonight, because the title and the theme for this year was Beloved Community. Afros and raised fists are irrelevant if all that's offered are feel-good words and basic rhetoric opinions that change like the hands on the clock, misrepresentation by folks not from our block. Of our plight well aware, playing both sides just isn't fair. All about agendas, you may as well pull up a chair, pull down your fist, and straighten your hair. When the truth be told, you really don't care. Our beloved community is in a state of confusion because we embrace chaos and dismiss solutions, yet we claim to want unity in our community, equity and equality. Can it just be an illusion? Unity in the community has to begin with you and me. With eyes of honesty, we look to see what's going on. With integrity and conviction, break the addiction of going alone to get along, knowing that going alone is wrong. And in that case, sometimes we have to stand alone, shine the light, address the wrong. Unity in the community is about inclusion and diversity, love and peace, not police leaving bodies dead in the streets. In a city full of pain and disdain, kill shots aren't the only place to take aim. We need programs for mental health, help for the helpless, hope for the hopeless, homes or at least shelter for the homeless, but instead, we'd rather spend millions on a building to be entertained. Our beloved community is not adequately addressing the increasing homeless population. It's a sad and serious situation that goes back to education. Dr. King loved his community. Because of it, he gave them the truth. So in that spirit, here's a bit of truth from one of the youth. And this part right here is from Z, 16 years old. Adults, it's time to set a good example. Time to be living proof to our legislators, administrators, and most importantly, our educators. We have one of the lowest ranked school districts, and it doesn't make sense to fire or place on administrative leave the one hired to fix it. Believe it or not, some kids pay attention in civics and follow politics. Just like Dr. King, we have dreams and plans, yet the Board of Education holds our futures in their hands. Truth, it seems, like a good education is unreachable if our teachers aren't teachable and code of ethics are so easily breachable.
Thank you, Ms. Bagby.
Disguise, and this I witnessed with my own eyes. But we talk of unity in our community. In conclusion, giving honor and thanks to Dr. King for his dream and courage that ended his life. racism, injustice, inequality, poverty still exists, so we must continue to fight. Dr. Means came here with the best intentions and the courage to do what's right. And for that, we should thank him for shining the light. Be informed, get involved, go vote early. This is a poem that was written by A.Z. Generation 2 and 3 from me, Mary P. Bagby. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Imani Scott Blackwell. I live at 870 North Chase Street, and I'm also here to speak in support of the Lennontown resolution. I saw recently that our community had the largest drug bust in history of this county, and Chief Spruill mentioned that, he removed these violent criminals off the streets. And I guess now I just find myself wondering, who is removing the violent criminals off the streets? Who is even holding them accountable for the folks that stole the homes from these Lennontown residents? I'm really wondering who is holding them accountable for perpetuating generations of poverty, not offering living wages, and making it necessary for people to rely on an underground economy selling drugs to where they can then be arrested in the largest drug bust in Athens-Clarke County history. So I'm just curious, as we talk about removing criminals off the streets, and particularly in the context of them doing this in coordination, making this body, not each of you, but this body in and of itself, an accomplice in that criminal act at that time. So I'm wondering who is going to be holding the past accountable, and the way that the past is now manifesting for us all here today. And the people that have the opportunity to do that are each of you. By supporting the resolution and making sure, and here we are in Black History Month nonetheless. What better time to make sure that it gets on an agenda to be voted on and passed in this month in order to commemorate Black History Month and show people in this community that you care about Black people. So what I can remember as a Black person living in Athens is when we demonstrated that the price for a police officer assaulting a Black person in this community was $250,000 that was paid out by this body. So I just really am curious at what point the white supremacy is going to be cleaned up from these streets. Or are we going to continue putting poor people in prison and claiming justice and acting like things are getting better when we continue to perpetuate the same systems and even know who is causing it? And still nothing can be done. We still can't find a way to make employers pay living wages. We still cannot find a way to ensure adequate housing. That is what I consider to be criminal. People deserve better in this community, so I can only hope that we can get ourselves, ideally in Black History Month, moving forward to clean up white supremacy out of our streets. Or I would hate to see some folks get cleaned up out these seats.
Thank you, Ms. Scott Blackwell.
Hi there, good evening. My name is Jason Pratt. I'm a local middle school teacher, and I also have a degree in history. I'd like to voice my support of the Lennontown resolution for recognition. I applaud all efforts that have been made to digitize the historical accounts of Lennontown so that future generations will be able to contribute to research of local history. I see in my classroom many of the present-day impacts of discriminatory policies from decades back. I support this resolution and any other effort to recognize history and work to repair and restore the economic status of families affected. To respond to some of the concerns that have been made about some of the language used in the resolution, I would argue that the action by the city of Athens in the 1960s to the residents of Lennontown does meet the definition of institutionalized white supremacy and terrorism. And if there's a commissioner that would prefer to use a different term to describe it, perhaps with a well-intentioned, pragmatic look at a potential UGA response, I would encourage them to permit families affected to seek redress on their own terms and in the spirit of participatory governance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pratt.
Good evening, everybody. Broderick Flanagan, 215 Gresham Street.
I'm here tonight to speak also in support of the Lennon resolution, but I'm mainly here because Ms. Hattie Whitehead spoke to me personally and asked me to help support this. And I definitely want to step up and help in any way I can. So I just want to bring a little bit of context to some of the things that people were talking about earlier. If you've watched the Below Baldwin documentary, there's an animation in the documentary that talks about when African Americans were trying to access the University of Georgia after emancipation, that they were met by students with guns. They were met by students with guns. And then a professor, Patrick Hughes Mell, he was a professor at the time, he said in a document that if the black people come back to campus, many of them may not leave with their lives. He later on became a chancellor at the University of Georgia, and he wrote some other language as well and treaties calling slavery neither evil or immoral. So when you think about these things in context, in 1844, I think that's when he wrote the treatise, but even moving forward, looking at when the university was going through the desegregation, we had to get a lawyer out of Atlanta to come down and to enforce that integration. So these are the times that we were living in. There were white mobs that assembled and did not want Mary Frances Early, Charlene Hunter Galt, and Hamilton Holmes to be at the University of Georgia. And there were many other students that tried to integrate before them. And I think it was even Patrick Hughes Mills that said the University of Georgia is a white man's college. That is also in the documentary. So the language that the Leonardtown residents and the writers of the resolution using is pretty accurate by those contextual terms. So I want to urge this body as we move forward to have more conversations with Leonardtown residents at the center of the conversation, to not water down the resolution. Don't try to rewrite it. Recognize what they have lived through, but also provide some type of economic redress for the property and the values and the wealth that these families lost. That is definitely important to these families. That's pretty much what I want to kind of share with the body tonight, and just remind everybody to, continue to work together towards a solution, and don't get caught up so much in the language of things. Call things what they are and what happened. If you haven't seen the documentary Below Baldwin yet, check it out. There are several campuses and colleges on university that were named after segregationists. That sounds like a white supremacy institution in my mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Flanagan.
Good evening. My name is Stephanie Flores. I live at 317 North Chase Street. I would first like to start by echoing all of the sentiments that have been stated before me. I think it's pretty clear, especially given that it's Black History Month, as Imani pointed out, what actions that need to be taken and how they should be taken. And I think it's interesting that, the community is doing most of the work for y'all. And they truly are, in terms of, doing the research and assessing needs and figuring out what needs to be done. The community is doing the work. And so what y'all just have to do is say yes and follow through. So I think that's something to be noted. I also want to talk about good governance today. So when we think about governance, we're good governance is when people who are in positions of power listen to the people. And yes, that's important. That's what this is, right? But listening is only a part of it. Because I think good governance is when people in positions of power are willing to be led by the people. So you can listen, but are you willing to be led by? Because these ideas are not coming out of a vacuum. People are not just throwing up these experiences and making them up and doing it to threaten your seat, whatever it is. No, these are the experiences of people who are survivors of white supremacy and of economic violence, systemic economic violence over a period of years, and it's still continuing today. So these are their experiences are like seeds, and they're planted in the ground, and they've been watered, and they've been stepped on, and they have been nutrient fed or nutrified, whatever the word is, but they have been soaking up all of what has come before them and all of what their experience is. And so it's something that has been growing. People's experiences are informed and they're growing. So when y'all are sitting up here and you have an opportunity placed before you, a proposal already placed before you, to recognize and redress, an opportunity to repair harm. And you sit there and you don't do anything, well then I would just ask you, what type of governance do you actually want to practice? Because after good governance, there's not a lot left that's actually in favor of people. So that's all I want to say. Oh, and I support the Linden Town community and this resolution and urge all of you to support it as well. That is it.
Thank you, Ms. Flores.
Hey, it's Adam Lasla, and I got my little paper. So I'm thinking about when the current mayor and commission were elected in 2018 and then taking office at the beginning of 2019. And I remember, I think the headline on the flagpole article was a quote from you, Mayor Gertz, that was a great era of equity approaches. And I was thinking about, I'm thinking about language, and I almost think we took that too literally, like the great era of equity approaches us while we're just kind of hanging out. And I know you guys haven't just been hanging out, you've been doing stuff. But I'm thinking that, oh wow, tonight, it actually did kind of approach, right? This one came, there's a whole bunch of things that you guys have to work super hard from scratch, that no one's doing anything, things you do that are thankless, right? You do things behind the scenes and nobody notices necessarily this little policy change you can do here or there. But this one came to you. So I guess I'm asking that we look at the folks here tonight, literally knocking on the door. So I'm just asking you to stand up, walk over to that door and open it. And I guess in case that metaphor is a little opaque, that means pass the resolution, get this process moving, and let's keep it going until we give back all that was stolen from folks. So let's go after that equity that's out there and that we know we can approach as long as we have the courage to do it. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Lasla.
Good afternoon. My name is Farrah Brown, 192 Oak Bluff Drive, and I wanted to share some lyricism from the great Open Mike Eagle. He had something similar happen in his town in Chicago, little town. It was his aunt's building, and there were 28 of them with 11,000 residents. And his aunt's building was the last one that got tore down, and this was in 2007. So it's still happening everywhere. I'm disappointed to see it happening here. So, I will start. They blew up my auntie's building, put out her great-grandchildren. Who else in America deserves to have that feeling? Where else in America will they blow up your village? Don't knock me down, don't knock me down. I beg you, I'm just chilling. I'll fight you all, I'm willing. Just show me who's that villain. I don't see one. I don't see one. I can't find nobody. Athens or Benghazi. A high-rise with no lobby, run up stairwells like Rocky. 'Cause these elevators so sloppy, stop me now if I'm lying. But I don't need your buy-in. Heard 100 sirens, attention's undivided. I was in there, she lived there, she raised a few of her kids there. No lobby, no swimming pool, no need in buying no swimwear. Got memories from in high chairs, I stayed quiet like ice bear. They say America fights fair, but they won't demolish your timeshare. Blew up my auntie's building, put out her great-grandchildren. That building cost $10 million. Now an empty lot, filled in. It was people there and kids there. And drug dealers and church folk. And they hit that shit with the wrecking ball so hard, thought the whole earth broke. All of them people dispersed through, federal to commercial. State demolished my circle. I guess everywhere is my turf, though. That's the sound of them tearing my body down to the ground. That's the sound of them tearing my body down to the ground. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brown.
My name is Kamayu Hull, and I reside at 575 Sandstone Drive in District 8. And I just came to speak in support of the Lennon resolution and just to ask the commission to consider everybody's perspective that was involved in Lennon. What if it was your neighbor that was displaced in Lennon-Town? What if it was your neighborhood? Andy, we're in District 8. What if it was Green Acres? What if it was my neighborhood, Cedar Creek? What if it was any other predominantly white neighborhood in this community? Melissa, what if those were your family members? Tim, what if those were your friends? Russell, we both went to the University of Georgia. What if that was me? What if these were your church members? How would you feel about the resolution then? Would you still hesitate to offer recognition? Would you still hesitate to offer redress? Would you still hesitate to pass this resolution? Now, I know some of you have a problem with some of the language that is in the resolution, particularly any acknowledgement that this city or the University of Georgia perpetuated an act of institutionalized white supremacy and terrorism. But I've thought long and hard about it, and I really can't figure out what else to call it. What would we call it if UGA had raised University Heights to build a vet school? The truth is, we wouldn't call it anything because we never would have let it happen in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hull.
Hi, I'm Audie Lee, and I live at 121 Beynart Court. I hadn't planned on coming up here to speak about Lennon-Town just to show my support in person, but I can't help but notice that there were a lot of people speaking today, and not one of them spoke against this resolution. So I understand that there are some people that are uncomfortable with the language, but I think they're only on the other side of this bar. And so just know that you have our back, we have your back. I know that it was hard for you on Monday, on Martin Luther King Day, Russell, when you got up and said that you weren't comfortable with the language. And in order for evolution to happen, sometimes we have to sit with that discomfort. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Lee.
Hello, good evening. My name is Rosemary Myers. I live at 585 Whitehead Road. I will go faster than I had wanted because I want to get this all in. Not good oratory, but here's what I have to say. Lennon-Town is one piece of a vast and continuing history of racism in America, and specifically in Athens. The suffering and horrors inflicted on African Americans here go back centuries, but have never been seriously acknowledged, much less honored. What can we, us, just here, Athens-Clarke County, do now to address this history? Are any sufficient amends, as this word is currently used, even possible in the face of such horror, such evil? I don't really think so. But here is one kind of smallish thing, you'll think it's big, is one smallish thing we can do. We, us, this community, the county, can dedicate a parcel of county-owned land to establish a museum of African American history. The museum needs to be in a worthy and dignified downtown location, a valuable downtown location, if it can even pretend to properly recognize and honor the history of this suffering, and also a location that white people, alas, mainly oblivious, will maybe have to, confront and learn from. Impossible? Impractical? No. Just down the street from here, 124 East Hancock, sits the Clarke County Water Department. Who owns this property and building? Us, the community. Great. And there are several other county-owned properties downtown I think that would do. I like this one. It's marble and it has 2-story classical columns, but, there are others. Many will say, grow up. This is impractical, too expensive. It's certainly not downtown. No, it is not. Be aware. I am only talking about the land, the building. The rest will follow. But if this land is dedicated, it must happen now. Did you know, maybe did even you know, some of you, that the county-owned downtown properties not yet designated are slated to be sold to private developers soon to pay for the land on which the new so-called $1 million Justice Center will be built? Surprisingly, the SPLOST project includes no funding for the land. Instead, it mentions that Clarke County can sell and will sell some valuable downtown property. Why not? The water department alone, over 5,000 square feet, is now valued at about $3.5 million. No. If this property is sold to developers, we know it will never be available again. There's lots more I've been pondering about the museum. Community input, enormous outside funding, maybe even Paul Kramer's support. But for now, just consider this. Even Atlanta has no such museum. You probably all have heard about Brian Stevenson's superb memorial to Southern lynching victims in Montgomery, Alabama. This could not have been easy to make happen. If Brian Stevenson can make a lynching memorial costing millions and millions of dollars possible in Montgomery, Alabama, then surely Athens can come up with a local Black History Museum that is worthy of the subject.
Thank you, Ms. Myers.
My name is Aimee Yosef Frimpong. I reside at 475 Brookwood Drive. I'd like to go the other way on the museum idea. I'd like a museum of institutionalized white supremacy, because obviously I think there's a confusion in the polity about what that is, and I think it would be a good public education institution, and it would be curated by me. Right, so institutions don't die like people do, and you're actually in the same institution that committed to violence, so you have a unique, a peculiar responsibility and capacity to make the situation whole if you want to do justice to Black communities. So let's be clear. There's a proposition before you concerning recognizing the people of Lenningtown were targeted for removal. This wasn't an anomaly. This was consistent with such urban renewal programs all across the nation in cahoots with the local authority. In this case, it's Athens-Clarke County. At the time, it was just Athens. Now, many of the survivors drafted the resolution calling for recognition. So it's either the case that Miss Geneva's father and family was terrorized out of their house, or they left voluntarily after negotiating a fair settlement. So it's either the case. It's one or the other. Now, Miss Geneva says her family was terrified. So either she's confused about her life and what that did to her family, or you guys, this is tantamount to gaslighting, which is another form of violence perpetrated by this body right here upon her and all of the survivors, because you're telling them they're liars about what happened to them. They don't know why they were moved. They don't know what they felt like and what they thought the consequences of trying to stay were. That you guys know much more about what happened, about whether or not they were scared for their life or their livelihood or their dignity than they do, in your infinite wisdom. Or it's the case that you don't want to tick off some of your friends who work at the university or some of the friends in the community who might not actually be Black or from Lenningtown. So you care about justice for Black communities, just not more than you care about your white friendships. And that is... well, is what leading you to actually commit this form of psychological violence, which is gaslighting. And I want everyone to know that that's what's going on. You're gaslighting the people of Lenningtown for your own comfort. For your own comfort, because, when you go to the National, people will look at you weird if you sign a resolution that says that we were, a white supremacist terrorist organization. So, you don't want to do that because you want your lunch with the National to be cool, not like and we'll just sacrifice the sanity and the dignity of the people in Lindentown, lest you have uncomfortable conversations over brunch. So you have actually, this resolution will be taken up by other cities and institutions that were also complicit. And you have the opportunity now to probably do what could be the most significant thing in your life. Or you could be Robert F. Blake.
Thank you, Mr. S. A. Frimpong. Appreciate you coming.
My name is Rochelle Berry. I live at 825 Gainesville Road. So I'm also here to talk about the Lindentown Project. I want to read this one sentence that is the one that is someone said they were uncomfortable with. I won't say who. Whereas instead of infusing money and resources into Lindentown for it to achieve middle-class status, the City of Athens and the University System of Georgia perpetrated an act of institutionalized white supremacy and terrorism, resulting in intergenerational black poverty, dissolution of family units, and trauma through the forcible removal and displacement of black families, and the accumulation of the majority of their wealth and political power within the university system of Georgia and the city of Athens. Now, this happened. We know this happened. We have living survivors who will tell you this happened. We have documents that can tell you this happened. And just to put it in context that the university is a white supremacist terrorist institution, we can look to its founding on the stolen land of indigenous folks, of the Muskogee, Creek, and Cherokee tribes. We can talk about the settler colonialists who started UGA as an institution for only white people and who said that we will kill you if you come back to black people to come get educated on this campus until the 1960s when it was desegregated. And then again, there was a riot for those people to come desegregate the university. To talk about, again, the slaves that were rented by the university to work on the university who were terrorized by the students there. To talk about, but it's not about that. It's not about the university and what the university wants or how we represent the university. It's about the Lindentown families. And when I think about how the Lindentown families even got there, we're already starting at a disadvantage, right? We've got generations of families on a place that used to be a plantation. We've got people who were terrorized out of the rural Georgia and came to this community. So Miss Geneva talks about her father and her grandfather and her father's brothers leaving Madison, Georgia in the middle of the night, walking 60 miles to Athens, it not being far enough, going to Oglethorpe to get away from white terrorism and leaving everything behind. This happened, this type of white terrorism that brought black folks to the city is them losing land, losing homes, taking anything they can carry on their backs with them to the city only to have this happen again. Right, by the city that was supposed to protect them, and instead fraudulently condemning their homes so they can pick them up at the lowest prices and then buying them through eminent domain.
Thank you, Ms. Berry.
Hey there, I'm Robin Whetstone, and I live at 1040 Macon Highway in Athens. And I wasn't planning on saying anything tonight, but I wanted to clarify something that Irami ended with. He said, we could have a chance to do something that would be meaningful to this town, or we could be like Robert F. Blake. And I didn't know this, but Robert F. Blake is the person who wouldn't let Rosa Parks on the bus. And I think I sat here at the beginning and heard all of y'all really sincerely talk about fair wages and living wages. And I believe that you are committed to that. I believe that you guys ran on a progressive platform and that you believe the promises that you made when you ran. And I'd just like you to think about the relationship between living wages and poverty in Athens and the way that we can make communities whole. And we have a real opportunity to be courageous here. So, Robert F. Blake.
Thank you, Ms. Woodstone. Any other public input this evening?
Hi, I'm Katya Tepper. I'm at 535 Woodland Hills Drive.
Sorry, can you repeat your name for me? I just need to make sure I get it for the record.
Katya Tepper. And I'm going to keep it short and to the point that I'm here in solidarity for the Lindentown Resolution, and I urge the Mayor and Commission to adopt the Lindentown Resolution as it is currently written on the residents' terms. That the Lindentown residents maintain control of the resolution process through an ad hoc committee composed of a majority of Lindentown residents in order to determine the effective mechanisms of recompensation. That the Mayor and Commission privilege Lindentown's voice over UGA and the University System of Georgia. That the Mayor and Commission champion the resolution as a key example of participatory governance that pursues reparative and restorative policies for Black communities in Athens-Clarke County and beyond. I really do believe this is a chance to set an example that can resonate nationwide. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stafford.
Hi, my name is Jake Brower. I am at 535 Woodland Hills Drive. I don't have that much to say either, but I'm here to be in solidarity with the Lindentown Resolution and lend my voice and underscore the very powerful statements and experiences that were expressed tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brower.
Hey, sorry, one last one. My name is Erin Stacer. I live at 378 Atlanta Avenue, and I'm speaking on behalf, to the Lindentown Resolution. We'd like to add that this is a chance to pass a model resolution, and a part of what makes this resolution a model resolution is that it was drafted in the language of the people who were oppressed. It's extremely important. Please, please, please pass this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stacer. Any other input this evening?
Announcement. The Athens-Clarke County Democratic Committee is meeting this Thursday, February the 6th, beginning at 5:30 p.m., and everybody's invited to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Athens at 780 Timothy Road. I would like to urge anybody that's listening that have a pastor would let your congregations know there are maybe 3 or 4 Black people in the Athens-Clarke County Dems. The Dems make decisions about the elections. I chair the affirmative action, and I'm a chair of one. I need Black people to come to these meetings that the Athens Democrats are having. Several people up there on the board are members, Mr. Edwards and Mr. Davenport, Ms. Mariah, Mr. Tim. They are on the Athens-Clarke County Dems. We need people to come and get involved because they are deciding what happened to us Black people. Some Black people, please come out to 780 Timothy Road this Thursday, 5:30, and make your voices heard. Let them know what you want. Be a part of the Democratic Party. Be a part of what's supposed to be democracy in Athens and across the nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bagby. All right, before we move on to manager, auditor, attorney, and commissioner reports, I have a few items tonight. 2 committee assignments. To the Government Operations Committee, please review and make recommendations regarding contracting and procurement activities related to minority, local, and underserved businesses to create a favorable business environment and enhance local wealth creation. This work should include outreach efforts and measurable goals and tracking. To the Legislative Review Committee, review and make recommendations regarding current alcohol serving opportunities for special events on public property and public rights-of-way, both free public activities and ticketed events, including flexibility regarding shape and size requirements of drinking areas, food service requirements, furniture requirements, and consideration of the ratio of security required per physical size or occupancy, as well as review of areas managed by leisure services that may be available for special events that serve alcohol. A couple of programming notes. February 10th, this coming Monday, at 5:30 at Hillsman, the Clarke County School District and the Athens-Clarke County Unified Government Commission will be meeting together. And then the next day, February 11th in the morning, the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement will be providing training and interaction opportunity for the Athens-Clarke County Commission. And then that evening and following, task force members from the public will be working to begin creating the Community Police Advisory Body. For the record, those task force members are Javius Collins, a recent high school graduate, Mocha Jasmine Johnson from the Athens Anti-Discrimination Movement, Fabian Jones, Hillsman Middle School Assistant Principal, Beto Mendoza or his designee from the Athens Immigrant Rights Coalition, Joan Pretty from Project SAFE, Mikesha Ross from the Athens Anti-Discrimination Movement, Dr. Sarah Shannon from the University of Georgia Department of Sociology, Shane Sims, Director of People Living in Recovery, Phil Smith, Director of the Concord Coalition, and Nakima Stovall with the Athens Land Trust Conservation Program. Last set of community support providers I need to make note of for the record are those nominating committee members for the Athens Music Walk of Fame, which we've discussed here. And those members are David Barbie, Michelle Davis, Montu Miller, Nate Mitchell, Mariah Parker, Dan Wall, Valina Vago, and Andrew Salinas as liaison with the Athens Cultural Affairs Committee. And they'll be meeting on the 13th in the evening at the Linden House. Lastly, before I turn it over to others in the room, I want to thank very much folks who came out in support of Linnentown this evening. There's obviously great weight and significance and gravity around what's been lost in this community, in Linnentown and Lickskillet and the Bottoms and other places, and activities certainly well before the time of urban renewal and in the decades since. And given that weight and gravity, it's important that that work be shared. And for work to be shared, we as a community and we as elected officials all need to engage. And so I very much appreciate particularly those members of the Linnentown community who welcomed me to sit down and have a conversation. And I think our subsequent conversations are going to be significant as well. As significant as those things that we have to work on the road ahead, given that we're expending many of your public funds in one of these urban renewal areas this year, and that we have much work to do around all of the themes that were resonant tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and ask the manager if he has any reports this evening.
I don't.
Attorney?
No.
Madam Auditor?
I do not.
All right. And we're going to go ahead and go around the room. I'll go in reverse order. I'll begin with Commissioner Hamby and end with Commissioner Davenport, and then we're going to have a motion to enter executive session.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of things. The discussion about, I know in our corridor group, we're looking at some recommendations
I'm not talking about corridor.
to send to the full Mayor and Commission. I'm hopeful that one of those is going to be the 10-foot lanes that got brought up to see what could happen there. And also, I'd like to give some special recognition to, y'all know Kathy Paget, who works for our government. She's received her 20-year pin. She's the sort of one who keeps us in line on the fire truck there. So she does that, and she's been here for 20 years. And whoever works with Kathy certainly deserves some hazard pay because she is she gets it done, but she makes sure she gets it done. So thank you.
I didn't say this at our last meeting, but I wanted to thank Blaine Williams and Tim Griffin for coming into our area on a cold, wet day before Christmas and meeting with residents. I'm looking forward to what we're going to do with some of the traffic calming, looking at the dirt roads off of Connolly and that fence off of North Avenue, which is really a safety issue. But they came out and the residents in that area really did appreciate it. The Bethel Homes Development Agreement was approved last night, so we're on our way. I did not wait for the agreement to be signed. I have some folk that are working with residents in the community, just trying to make sure they're always in the loop, and also have brought in Georgia Legal Services. We've met with Rick Parker, again, to make sure all the residents have all the legal help they need in this transition. The prosperity package is moving slowly, but it's moving. We are planning a prosperity package town hall meeting, and we just kind of agreed tonight. The tentative date is going to be February the 29th. We do have a committee meeting coming up February the 6th with the attorney. You are expecting us, right, Judge? Okay. And lastly, I really do want to address Lennon Town. I 100% support Lennon Town. Let me get that on the record. There has been a lot of miscommunication, and when miscommunication happens, you have a lot of people who take sides not knowing what's in the middle. I've always supported Lennon Town. I've done my own research. I think the mayor has put resources for some of the research. We had commissioners that were wanting to sit down and work on the resolution. So there's been a proactive, positive way that we wanted to work with you. Now, for all of our young people that spoke, I had to play back in my mind and kind of remember I'm a grandmama now, but I was your age one time. I remember when I marched as far as Seattle for human rights for Hispanic farmers. I remember when I spoke out about prescription drugs for seniors who could not afford it. We organized seniors to go to Canada to buy their drugs. I thought I was going to change the world. That was my intent. I'm at my age now that I still have to change the world. You cannot define one person, define anybody for one issue. We got to get to know each other. One issue should not define anybody. So, Mr. Crook, it's such a pleasure meeting you. I didn't even know you were around, but I'm glad I do know you. My dad's nickname was Crook, so I won't forget you. But I just hope we can get to the place where we are sitting around talking instead of sitting in a place where some folk feel as though they're being threatened. Well, you know what? First of all, I wasn't talking directly to you, okay? So let's be in order, okay? We good? All right. So my point is, we're going to work with Lennon Town. We're going to not just put something on paper. We need to be looking at something that is sustainable, tangible, and financial or policy change. Putting something on the paper is just not enough. And we need to look at all the communities that were dismantled. Lennon Town has opened my eyes and my heart. Joey, you know I love you no matter what, but I want us to work together. And that's what I'm going to do. And if you don't want to work together, that's fine too. But that's what I'm going to do. All right? We good? We good. All right. Thank you. That was my report.
I was happy to see the crowd tonight address Lennon Town. I think that raising awareness is absolutely the most important step to be taken right now. For folks to learn about what was done, I certainly have expressed myself and have made my position clear in this community regarding the resolution. And I think that this is a process. You know, we're working towards meaningful legislation, and we might have some minor differences. I mean, I view them as minor. And maybe I'm learning more every day. You know, maybe they're not so minor. Maybe they are major. Maybe people should keep coming to these meetings and helping me to understand. And, you know, I'm fine with how people feel about me. You might not like me. On a good day, my wife likes me.
Well,
yeah, halfway. But I am committed to getting something passed. And I'm here at the table. And in my understanding of the way legislation gets passed, it requires compromise. I mean, this is a legislative, deliberative body. And I'm sitting at this table saying thank you for coming, and thank you for raising awareness, and thank you for sharing this information that's so important for the historical consciousness of this community. I've pointed out a few portions that I disagree with, but I'm making that apparent in good faith, hoping that there will be some degree of compromise to get a piece of legislation passed. I think it's part of the process, and I look forward to seeing folks come to these meetings more and more, because we can't do it alone. You know, this body doesn't exist in a vacuum, and so we certainly need the support of the citizens behind the actions that we take, or else they're just sort of empty. So, thank you.
Well, I've got to talk about a couple of things before I talk about Lennon. The first one is I've asked the mayor and the manager to help solve a problem at Advantage Behavioral Health Services. Their landlord, where they have 11 women with their children in transitional housing for a program that's been around since 2001. It's a very successful drug recovery program with a 100% success rate for these women who've had substance abuse, kick the habit, in transitional housing, they get a job and they can afford to leave. Advantage has been trying to solve this problem about where to put these families, an acceptable place to put these families, for 5 months. You may recall I asked a few months ago to think about $320,000 to go to Advantage Behavioral Health to help remodel a purchase of a building that we're going to make, but that purchase fell through. It was sold before we could come up with a solution. Now they've had it designed, and they're working on building permits now to modify their North Avenue building, which we own, so that they shrink their administrative space to one half, and the other half becomes this space for these families. This will be able to house 13 families, so it'll actually add 2 families. And it'll actually be a very appropriate space in a great location. We've got the Department of Labor there. We've got daycare there. It's a safe environment. Culturally, it's a healthy environment. So they've asked us for $160,000. So I've asked the manager and the mayor to find that money in capital money or whatever. But folks, the last resort, and it seems to me like a perfect application for the prosperity package of $160,000 to keep 13 families who are in transition, who are working on their futures, of a successful program, one-time expense. So the mayor and I, the manager, will be coming back to you with something. They have to be out of those houses by March the 31st, out of those apartments. That means we have to have this place built out before then. So we're on a tight schedule, so please help us out. Number 2, Commissioner Denson and I have been a part of a task force of judges and probation officers and cops and sheriffs and working on a pre-arrest diversion program. Looks like it's going to roll out in March, and apparently it doesn't require us to make any policy changes. This is something that they're going to implement. This has been headed up by our solicitor, C.R. Chisholm, where minor crimes, first offense minor crimes, the accused will have the opportunity to not even be arrested, but to go into a pre-arrest diversion program, which will be tailored for whatever their needs are. It might mean you got to stay in school. It might mean you need mental, behavioral health counseling. It might mean you do some community service, or it might need some kind of educational seminar about the results of your behavior. So I'm really excited about this program, and it includes first offense for possession of marijuana. So it's a start. So Tim may have more to say about that. He and I have had fun doing this. And the last is Linnentown. I support the Linnentown resolution. I always have. Like my colleagues, it requires compromise. This resolution is going to be a resolution that we adopt and we speak to. And it is a political process. I volunteered a month ago after a long meeting where I almost cried with Hattie. Well, you can laugh if you want. I'm not laughing. Yes, I am. Who the hell do you think you are to call me a liar?
I'm just asking Commissioner Neesmith to continue his comment.
I spent some very good time with Miss Hattie and learned a lot. And it hurt.
Oh, this is not good.
And I volunteered to help move the resolution to take it to each commissioner and work on the resolution that we could all adapt. I volunteered to bring UGA to the table. I talked to UGA. They wanted to do it. But my offer was not accepted. In fact, it was rejected. My offer still stands. I want a resolution that is recognition and redress. Those were your words, recognition and redress. Those are the key words. Those are the important things. And that's the effect that I want to help support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Just have a few things. The first one is the next District 5 Town Hall is going to be on February 24th. Which is a Monday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. at Rabbit Hole Studios off of Old Commerce Road. And it's going to be focusing on ways that we can use policy to support artists and musicians here in Athens. And on another note, today is actually Transit Equity Day. And the reason that it is today is because of the person who made Robert F. Blake famous. The great Rosa Parks. This is her birthday, actually, and that's why Transit Equity Day falls on today. Ms. Parks understood and fought for public transit access as a racial, social, and economic justice issue. She was way ahead of her time, in more ways than one. And she understood that all people deserve access to and dignity in using public transit. And I look forward for us moving our transit system, which is already a very fine transit system, even further into this with inequity by hopefully taking the second step in a second year of moving towards zero fare transit. So I'm hoping that will happen in our budget talks coming up. And then, to Linnentown. I greatly appreciate everybody who came out here tonight. This makes me very happy whenever City Hall is full of people, even babies tonight, which is very happy. We should be a very family friendly. Everybody, all ages, should be in this building right here. I was able to walk the Linnentown. And I know a few other commissioners, I know Commissioner Edwards did, I think Commissioner Link and Parker, maybe some other ones did also. And the erasure of it was one of the most shocking things to me. It was so complete. And I was sitting here thinking as people talked, and I've gone to the website and looked up and some of the records and some of the footnotes and seen the pictures of people's lives and heard the stories of the residents here. I think that's the thing. It's so easy to forget, and that we get reminded of when we hear the residents, is that this was people's lives. These were families living together. This was meals being shared in these rooms. These were where people laid their heads, where they had children. Where they tried to fulfill their dreams, and some of the stories were just so personal and so real. And then to go and walk that property, and I mean, like, the erasure was complete. You could not tell. There's nothing there. There's nothing left. And I looked at the pictures. You can see the sky picture, the satellite pictures, and you can see where it used to be. And you can tell, actually, I know it's talked about here, like it was dirt roads. You can see the difference. You can see that stretch of dirt road where the black families lived. But you walk there now, and there's nothing left. And time makes history difficult enough to preserve. But then when you have such an intentional erasure that happens to your history, I honestly can't really imagine how that must feel to have. It's hard to go back to your hometown anyways. Like, oh, everything looks different. But to go back to your home, and it was intentionally made it look like it was never there. To me, that's deep. And so I support the Linen Town. I support the current iteration, if that's what is pursued. But I do hope, though, and I do hope, though, that we, the residents, and I know the residents spoke to this tonight, that we, the residents, the mayor, the commission, can sit down and work together so that we can optimize our ability to implement those end goals of redress. Because it is not enough to only recognize. It is not enough, as Commissioner Thornton put it, just to have a piece of paper. It's not enough. That's not why I signed up for this job. It's just to pass pieces of paper with good words on it. That's an important part of it. But it's the action that those words lead to. That's why I did this. And so I want to make sure that that is our end goal. That I know from talking to the residents, that's the residents' end goal. That is my end goal as a commissioner. And as the first time that I sat down with Miss Whitehead, and she said it many times since, and I've heard it, is that we need to make it right. And Athens-Clarke County needs to make it right. University of Georgia needs to make it right. And, some of our history is shameful, and that's just the truth. It's shameful. But it only continues to be shameful if we refuse to recognize it and to actually address it. So I believe, I'm very hopeful that this body is on board to do that, and I know that the residents are. So I hope that we can push forward and just find a way that we can be working together to actually have those end goals that are in that resolution actually come to fruition.
I yield my time to my colleagues.
I want to address the folks that came here representing Linen Town and thank them for coming. When I first told Joey Carter about Linen Town and the bits and pieces that I had heard from my own constituents, that was probably only about a year ago, and to see all the organizing that's happened since is pretty heartening. But Linen Town's not the only community that's been erased in Athens and around the country. And when we talk about redress demands resources. Resources were taken from these communities, from these families, from individuals, and they're certainly deserving of redress. We're talking about taking public resources and conveying them to private entities to build multi-million-dollar facilities on so they can help fund an arena. There's some $30 million in lease money that's going to be earned from that public property. I think that we need to think about this issue of redress and all the harms that were done in our community and where prosperity came from in our community and who has missed out on that prosperity and why and how the city
of Athens was complicit in it. The university has been complicit in it. And we need to look for opportunities with every public project that we approve to find the resources for that redress. And I'm hoping as we talk more about the Classic Center project and about the North Athens project that we always, always, always seek those opportunities to find those resources for redress.
I like to remind everyone of like a couple of things. When we had a showing like this last time, it was about cats. And you know what we did about those cats? We did something. And it didn't take a lot of nice words about how significant it's going to be when we finally figured out what to do. It didn't take any conversation about compromise. We acted swiftly to ensure that justice was had for the cats, y'all, for the cats. But when it comes to the breakup of black communities, suddenly we need to all come together and sing Kumbaya, and suddenly we need to like sit down and make sure that the white men sitting behind this rail have control over the process by which we come to decide what justice looks like. Even in the face of the oppressed community coming before us, having done all of the work of deciding what justice looks like for them. When we sit in their faces and talk about compromise and talk about how we're gonna figure out something significant to do at some point, some way, somehow, that is white supremacy still.
Oh, that's right.
That is white supremacy still. Months ago, we came together to sign and pass a resolution denouncing white supremacy in our community. And I reminded us then that those pretty words on that paper meant nothing if we did not take action to ensure that the people of color in our community felt safe here and felt at home here. So this is our time to act. This is our time to act, y'all. Those words on that pretty little piece of paper are calling us to do something now. And I hope that you all will have the courage to do the right thing. Because what I noticed this evening is that no one from the University of Georgia, the Allison McCullochs, et ceteras, came up to speak against this resolution. And you don't want to know why? Because they trusted you all to stand up for them. That's right. And so I'm here to say to all of you that I stand up for you all. I will continue to stand with you all. I will continue to insist that the resolution as written will make it onto a future agenda, that is voted, that is passed, that we follow through on every single step outlined, because I trust you for the lived experiences that you have undergone, for the research that you all have done, for the ways that you brought the community together, that you all know what you're talking about when you talk about justice. Thank you.
Yeah. Good job.
I can't top that, so I have nothing to say.
Entertain a motion to move into executive session.
Cut off, and I didn't finish my last little statement before I was cut off. I wanted to say what my point was. I did a lot of that stuff when I was younger, like your ages and stuff. And guess what? I thought it was going to be over with. But if I did those little marches and stuff, it's never over with. You're going to get my age, there's going to be another issue. Someone once wrote, slavery doesn't end, it just evolves. Racism, social justice, that's your goal, but it evolves. So we got to stick in it for the long haul. And the people who support you, you need to lift them up, at least find out what's going on before you attack them. Find out what's going on. Because I thought I was going to be through with this kind of work. But guess what? Never going to be through.
Motion to adjourn public session and enter executive session.
So moved.
All right, got a motion from Commissioner Neesmith, second from Commissioner Davenport. All in favor?
Aye.